It's 5 o'clock. We're going to be doing the second portion of our budget tonight and budget presentations from department heads. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll kick it over to City Manager Steve Sarvey.
Mayor and Council, first off, I'd like to say thank you. Yesterday's meeting, we had more discussion, I think, and George, maybe you can back me up on this since this is your, what, 46th
tonight.
46th budget. At least in the years that I've been here, which I know pales in comparison, we've not had that much discussion as we had yesterday. So we really do appreciate your thoughts and questions, comments. Some of the information that you asked for, we provided today. I want to thank Jessica for getting all this information together. Again, we don't expect you to look at it all right now and be able to, but we'll go through much of this at the end of our presentation today. Budgets and governing are team sports, and so we appreciate all working together because I know we all want the same outcome, which is a good budget that we not only feel good about, but will meet the needs of the community. So with that, I think we'll jump right in to Fire Department, Chief Biddle.
Mayor and Council, we are presenting a reduced budget from 2021. And we were to some extent be able to do that. We had certain line items and we're projecting COVID issues with training funding and so forth. So we were able to reduce a number of line items. We did adjust some vehicles, and we moved that around a bit, and some air bottles that were in CIP. And we have a plan to get that purchased and met by the expiration date on the bottles. So is there any specific line items you'd like to go over? I think there's only one line item that we actually bumped up $500, and that was Ems Supplies, and I hate to say it, Narcan and epinephrine prices have skyrocketed. So we tweaked that. Actually, I stand corrected by $1,000, and that is $61.19. But you should see reductions throughout all the rest of the line items or the equivalents. 41, I'm sorry, or 40. Page 40.
Mayor,
Go ahead, George.
Chief, now this Narcan, or however you pronounce it now, is that simply a city expense to purchase it, or is there like, any other agencies that would help fund that particular drug?
State, yes, and the state actually gives that out free nasally. They have a dosage that comes, but it's via nasal, where they have to actually be breathing to do it. And typically what we find with our overdoses, they're not breathing. So we give Narcan intramural IM with a shot. It's more effective, and you hate to juggle cost and lives, but I think it's more than paid for whatever increase the city is seeing.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Yep.
I have a question. Chief, I know you said the supply expenses are a little bit lower than last year, but I know there were some new equipment purchases you had in the CIP initially. Are there things that
Correct.
we need?
Well, we did have SCBA bottles, and if you remember over the past 3 years, this has been a 3-year process of replacing all of our bottles. We worked it out where it's going to be an absolute necessity in next year's budget, and what we'll do is is we'll put the order in November with the delivery date of January with an expiration date of February 2023 on the bottles. So the last thing we want to do, and city manager and I discussed this, we don't want to get in a position where the National Fire Protection Agency comes down, or God forbid OSHA comes down, and we have out-of-date bottles. We have a plan in place to accommodate the whole retrofit of our air bottles.
Okay.
Sorry, my bad.
I just want to make sure nothing was
Yeah,
cut that,
no, we
guys
have a plan,
need.
and
Okay.
it'll be a for sure next year. So
great.
yes.
Mayor, I would move for tentative approval of the fire department budget.
Second,
We have a motion from George and a second from Eileen. Any other questions or discussion? I do have one question for Kurt. Can you just kind of generally talk about how this last year affected your department? Not just fiscally, but you know, what kind of measures did you have to go to in this past year in response to COVID-19? And you know, how will that potentially affect us moving forward?
Sure. And you know, knock on wood, but we really did come out with an effective roadmap for the fire department. Back when COVID initially started, I think what the city saw was the Winona Fire Department being utilized as public health.
Mhm.
Public health, and I'm not throwing rocks, but we're probably 7-8 months behind the curve on the initiation of COVID. Boy, and they caught up and they're full steaming. I mean, they're doing a wonderful job, but I think the city and the county utilized the fire department as a public health department for a long time. And I'm proud of my guys. We did an exceptional job. I'd like to, they really did do a nice job. It was really interesting when we were physically closed down as a state and as a nation. We went through a month and a half of basically lockdown. It was an eye opener to see how many falls we went to.
Mhm.
Everybody was maintaining their houses, climbing up on ladders, and the bulk of our calls were actually home injuries with people working on their house. We did see a reduction in overall calls. We didn't have the car accidents. We didn't have your typical heart attacks. We didn't have, so we actually saw a couple hundred, I think in that month and a half, we were about 150 calls shy of where we were the year prior. So call volume wise, it really kind of settled things down. Going forward, I think we're in a much better position as far as COVID goes, just for the simple fact that that roadmap was worked out with the county. The county's still utilizing our paramedics, and we'll be starting booster shots in October.
Okay.
And the city manager and I talked back in, must have been March. If the big secret back then was, boy, if we could get testing kits and actually find out who had COVID right off the get-go, we could have probably put a crunch to our caseload, and we really saw the country step up its ability to, you go in and get a COVID test and find out 2 hours
Mhm.
after that. So that should be beneficial going forward with COVID. I think the city manager agreed. The fire department has been wearing masks for a long time. We've never not worn a mask for the last almost 2 years on calls. We've just done that out of pure precaution. Internally, within stations, it's my biggest fear. I'm going to lose a station, and manning wise, that would be just totally detrimental. I don't have the staff to keep engine companies in service on both sides of the town. If I had 7-8 cases, we'd be done. So I think we've gone above and beyond just trying to keep our engine companies in service for the city. That's my fear with Delta, and with the case counts and what we were dealing with back during the previous spike during last summer, and then in January, cases were 20, 22, and now we're looking at an average of 40.
Mhm.
So Delta's catchy. I mean, and you could almost roughly say it's twice as catchy as what we were dealing with previously. But we're not Texas, we're not Florida. We have 70+% of the population vaccinated. But I really believe for us, the gauge is going to be our ICUs. We need to keep an eye on our ICUs, and as a legislative body, we're going to really have to gauge our, what we do based off that. So,
Yeah, and basically I was getting at, I've seen your team work firsthand this year, and a phenomenal job. I mean, really, you guys were there all the time, and I just want to commend you publicly for the work that everybody's done from top to bottom. I mean, you're important, but we know
oh no,
without
I'd much
them,
rather
you're
have a
nothing.
paramedic
So-
and an engine than be quacking about numbers here. So,
Yeah.
and on that note, and what we did this year, we were in a 3-year process adding an additional our person to our West Station for all shifts. We got through 2 of the 3 years, and I just want to really quick hit on the importance of that. And I know we're going to have to. This is a tough budget, and I understand that. But George, you'll appreciate this, but 30 years ago, we actually initiated our part-time program. We went from a department of 43 to 21 with the concept that the part-time program would be viable. We'll call them in when we need help and so forth. Now, I'm not throwing rocks at millennials. I'm not throwing rocks at generation whatever. But the problem we're running into, and it's been historic. It's, the state of Minnesota has been running into volunteerism issues for the last 20+ years. The fire service has borne the brunt of that, just because the state of Minnesota ranks 49th out of 50 states in the country as far as full-time employees in the fire service. We really relied on volunteers in the state of Minnesota. The problem we're having in 2019, I tried to, I went before council, and we actually doubled our longevity pay, which is a lump sum cash payment, and it's actually located on page 38. But we doubled that with the hopes that to meet their longevity, they have to meet 70% of the training and 35% of the page-ins. So we've slowly been trying to throw carrots out there for the part-time groups to actually participate and come in on calls. It's gotten exceptionally difficult over the last, since 2019, we tried to address it, but in this day and age with 30 years ago, you had a TV with wood around it and wood floors and everything else, but you go into a house nowadays and everything's low mass synthetics. Everything's made of plastic. The fire department literally on the fire side of it has about 10 minutes to put that house fire out. After that, it spreads too fast, it burns too hot, and we have 10 viable minutes to actually put that fire out.
Mhm.
The difficult part of this is we just don't have the part-timers coming in, the numbers coming in off duty to support us. Now, yep, we can use mutual aid and have people come and help us, which we're using.
Mhm.
But having that extra body on a shift and having that 7th or 3rd guy at the West Station it's night and day. There's no comparison. And I think the League of Minnesota Cities did a study about 18 years ago on the effectiveness of an engine company. And just adding that extra person was an additional 38% effectiveness. And along those lines, we have minimum staffing requirements we need to have anywhere from 13 to 17 people on scene to do a hazmat incident or do a confined space or a trench rescue. So it all boils down to numbers, and it's just been getting progressively tougher to get paged in people, particularly our part-time staff in. Now, it served us well for 30 years, but it's on the decline, and we've really addressed it on 2 of our shifts, having that additional person. And I sure hope, when everything looks a little greener, we could come back to that extra person on that third shift. It's my job to make sure this department's ready for the next 5, 15, 20 years. And this is absolutely the most important thing I'm going to do as fire chief, is getting that third guy on that shift. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, Chief. So I know that part-time fire people have often used that as an entree into full-time employment.
Yeah.
And that's not happening so much anymore? We're
No,
not getting the
we-
part-time people?
We have, I would say right now we have probably a station in Madison, Wisconsin that are fully staffed purely by numbers by the Winona Fire Department. We train them and they get hired and they go to La Crosse, they go to Rochester.
Right.
So it's kind of a revolving door, and, to a small extent, financially, you're looking at a bunch of turnout gear down in our basement because they get trained up and then they go on and get hired somewhere else. Winona's a horrible sized town. If we had enough rotation where we could actually keep them in the game and yep, you're going to get hired next year or 2 years, it would work out great. But we're just a horrible sized town, and we're a training institute for our part-timers.
So you're saying we need more fires?
No, no, we don't want any fires. No.
Just joking. Thank you for
Yep.
your answer.
Steve?
Chief, if you could help me understand here, did we not have some overtime that we paid due to COVID and considerable overtime?
Yes.
Where would I see that in the
So-
documents
So
here?
we actually were reimbursed.
Okay, so that was backfilled.
Correct. And I think the number actually was pretty significant if it was on here.
I was expecting it.
I
I'd
think
like
it
to
was
see it.
100 and. Is it on there? Yeah.
It's on page 38, under the GL code 101-42210-1103, $114,029.
Okay. and I-
Now that is for 2020. 2021 is where you'll see the
238.
the overtime due to the that
Vaccination.
vaccination
clinics.
clinics.
Yep. And the city was reimbursed for all of that.
Okay, so that reimbursement has happened and, okay, just checking. Thank you.
Eileen, did you have a question?
Yeah, just that since I started on council, I think most of the conversations I've had with the chief have been about needing more people, and I would just I really hope that we can do what you're asking and next year find the money to get another person, because that is really crucial. And as you mentioned, with the Delta variant coming, I know you guys are going to be really busy still. And I think that however we can support you, especially since those services are so necessary, really hope we can do that.
We are definitely committed to that third shift firefighter, and because the importance of having 7 firefighters on a scene, it allows you to do interior search and start knocking the fire down. Without that number, it makes it really difficult. But then within 20 minutes, you need that next group to show up, because that's when you're gone through your first air bottle and you're getting pretty tired to keep going. So we keep running these scenarios time and time again, and we know we need to do it. It's just, again, would have been really difficult for me to propose what we did staffing wise and still add that firefighter. So I think it was probably the last thing that we pulled.
Mhm.
Tough decisions.
George?
Yeah, I noticed, Chief, and I said, when I was in there in 93 and 94, the restrictions or the requirements for the part-time firefighters was a lot more strict than what it is now. I mean, you couldn't miss anything. I mean, if you did, you were in front of the chief and you got to know why did you not come in at 1:30 on an early Sunday morning for a fire? I mean, like I say, I noticed that it is getting less restrictive,
Yep.
And unfortunately, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I mean, the requirements are dropping for them.
Yep.
Plus, at that time, the part-time firefighters, we were paid $7.50. That's what the salary was, so,
And George was overpaid, so.
yeah.
That's
Go ahead, Pam.
Yes, so what are we talking about in terms of another firefighter? What's the number to hire another person?
Around 106 all in. But
That includes
that,
benefits and everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen?
Never mind.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No? Then let's vote on the motion. All those in favor, aye?
I
Opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, Kurt. Chief.
Thanks, chief. We can do some cutting here now, huh?
You want to do this or do you want me to? Budget. Yeah, just highlight technical services. Fine. So, yes, I'm ready. So one of the big activities in the community development department this year is the comprehensive plan. We've been talking about that for quite some time, and Carlos will expand on that a little bit right before he presents the planning budget. But this really is the future roadmap for a city. The inspections department within the previous 2 years was very robust with development. And we do see that activity continuing. We expect Cedar Brook to be on soon. Hyatt Manufacturing is under construction and Fastenal is finishing up, hoping to be in their building in December. In the community development department, we continually look for funding opportunities. We do have one position that we're not presenting in the budget this year, and that's the community development specialist. But we will continue to use an agency to look for funds and secure grants. And at an opportune time, when things are more stable, we would definitely like to bring that position back. It adds a lot of value to the community and especially in housing rehab. The Port Authority's been very active with land assembly. We're proud of our partners. We did 26 emergency loans during COVID, and the staff in the community development office was excellent at getting that money out. The two big capital projects that are in the budget, through our MnDOT Port Assistance Fund, we have a project called the Mississippi Riverfront Connection. This is about accessibility at Levy Park and docks and rail storage yard improvements. The second big item in the CIP and within the budget as a placeholder is a public parking structure. And that would be part of the downtown development the port has been working on. So with that, I'm going to touch briefly on revenues. What I will say is this, we estimate in revenues, pages 1 through 5, things like zoning permits, sign permits, it's pretty mundane. And we did budget appropriately. Two things to point out though in the revenue, the inspections department, because they are an enterprise fund, they do pay on page 3, about a third of the way down. It's account number 101-34107. They do pay an administrative fee to the general fund revenue account for the city. And then directly above that on 34105, the Port Authority actually pays 75% of the community development budget. And the Port Authority pays a portion of finance director and city manager. So that's money coming in from the Port Authority. I'm happy to answer any questions on other revenues.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, if I could,
Go ahead,
thank you,
Steve.
Lucy, if I could just tee off right there, I see. I'm on that 34107 inspections fee. Is that like, is it rental house inspections? Is it construction inspections? All
That's,
of the above?
so that is a fee that the Inspection Enterprise Fund pays to the city, and it's for administrative
Ah,
services.
I got you.
So kind of their office rent, the finance department.
Yep.
All the services, payroll.
I get it. Thank you.
Are there any questions about revenue? If not, I will defer to Carlos to, he's just going to highlight a couple of things in the planning budget and just briefly talk about the comp plan.
Afternoon, Mayor and council members. Planning budget starts on page 28 and goes on to page 29. It's a relatively short budget, but an important one. The first thing that I'll highlight is about halfway down the page on page number 28. It's our professional services and technical services other. You'll see a substantial reduction in activity under that line item, primarily due to the undertaking of the comp plan next year and the work that we'll be doing on that. So pulling back a little bit on some of the historic designation type work, we've been going strong on that over the past few years here, so that Luke and myself will have a little bit more time to dedicate to the comprehensive plan and the heritage preservation section within the comprehensive plan. The second large item in the planning department budget that Lucy touched on is the second portion of the comprehensive plan. That's on page 29. We're at 125,000 for next year. That's the same as what was budgeted for this year for a total $250,000 project. That total budget number is based off of what peer cities around the same size as Winona pay for comprehensive plans, recently updated ones, and is even a little bit less than what other cities have paid cost-wise. It's important that the comprehensive plan not only includes the planning department, but really touches on all departments throughout the city, not only in this building, but outside of it as well. And it's really a document that pays for itself. I took a look at the existing comp plan that we have from 2007, and I pulled out just 5 projects that the comp plan had a key role in facilitating and getting to be approved. And those projects combined bring in $110,000 in taxable revenue to the city every year, each year. So the document helps to facilitate not only private projects, but also makes the city of Winona more competitive when it comes to receiving state and federal grants as well. So bottom line is we got 80% of our existing plan done. So it's time to for us to look at a new one. And we'll be getting going with the plan. We've been laying the groundwork over the last few months here. And we'll be getting going with that in the fall. And I expect it to continue through next year, may even go just a little bit into 2023. But in summary, that's what we have for next year's planning budget. Any questions?
Good, thank you.
Pam, go ahead.
This is not really a budget question, but that's an interesting, what you said is interesting, that it's 80% of the previous comprehensive plan you've accomplished. I think that deserves some more play. I'd like to know more about it myself, but that's really a fine thing. That shows people how beneficial a comprehensive plan can be, right?
Yes, definitely, and thank you. I appreciate that. And that's throughout all the sections, not just in planning, but in parks and
Right.
finance and historic preservation. It's throughout the whole city.
Yes, it's reassuring. We know where we're going. Thank you.
Thanks. Eileen, you have something? Okay. Okay. Next section, community development.
Community development is on page 68. This is the Community Development Office, Development Coordinator, part of the admin assistant, myself, and the budget is below even the 2020 budget. If I add the community development and CD matching budgets, they're down 22% from the year 2020. We do know that those reductions are needed, but as I said, we're hopeful to get back up and running in an appropriate time. We have our general expenses. We use professional services like appraisals, surveys, et cetera. That's under on page 68 under professional services. We have some memberships and subscriptions, which are very important. These are entities that we work closely with and belong to, and we learn about a lot of funding opportunities through these entities. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's one line item not included this year, the mayor's contingency. That was for events. For example, when we had the consul general here from Japan. So we don't have that amount in the CD budget, but my understanding is there's some in the city managers.
Right, there's some in the city managers, so Mark Peterson would probably throw something heavy at me for, because he loved having his own little line item. But yeah, we decided to zero this out and then we'll operate off the other one.
Why
Very
would
good.
that have been in community development's budget?
And that was kind of a question that I was always asking. You know, again, we're taking a much deeper dive this year than we have in the past. And it just, to be able to say, let's just have it in one spot rather than two. If Lucy needs, you know, sort of that loose change to go do something, buy the lapel pins or something, whatever, then we'll cover that out of that budget item, but it'll come out of our budget rather than hers.
It was largely the community pins. We order them, we use a lot of them, other things such as that. And as I mentioned, when the consul general was here, we provided a luncheon and did a tour, and there were some costs with that.
Sure.
Any questions on community development? Pages 68 and 69. The CD matching budget begins on page 7. Again, here we did, we're not filling at this time the community development specialist position in the 2022 budget. We do have some contractual services budgeted. And we are hopeful that we can work with a partner agency if we have an opportunity to apply for a grant. Also, Nick Larson is still with us. He's in the position of development coordinator, does stay on top of housing, and we're just, you know, making it work. So any questions about CD matching?
If I could, Lucy, would this be are you seeing this next year, year after that you'd fill the position, or?
I think we just need to monitor it, but I would hope we could add it back on the 23
Okay.
budget.
Okay, and then I wasn't clear. You said something about contracting. Are you contracting some of this work on a limited basis? Is that what we're
We
doing?
may do that in 2022. So if we
Alright.
need some help writing a grant or administering a housing
All right,
development, we could work with SEMCAC or HRA or.
okay. Thank you for explaining to me. Sometimes you say this, but I gotta get it. So,
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, George.
Whose position is open? Nick's?
Yes,
Okay, because Nick replaced Myron.
correct.
Okay, right. Good.
So we're down one,
Sure.
and Nick is doing fabulous and still keeps tabs on housing. Not that we're forgetting about it at all, just, you know, absorbing it. So,
Nick was an excellent promotion to that position, no
Yes.
doubt about that.
Yep, Nick's a good guy.
And Nick and I are both, you know, really sort of tag teaming the housing. I'm on a League of Minnesota Cities Housing Task Force. And Nick does great work here in the community as well. So we're constantly going back and forth on housing issues. And actually the county has stepped up and is providing not only some money, but personnel costs to address housing issues, especially for homeless and those that are experiencing, you know, some housing issues. So it's been good to see a concerted effort. It takes a lot of I think a lot of the pressure off of us to have someone doing that full time. But I agree with Lucy. This, I think, was the second to the last cut before the firefighter. And again, we did that based upon the fact that Nick had moved over and things seem to be functioning and operating quite well. And we do have money in there in case there is a project that we need to take advantage of.
Thank you.
As we continue on, I'll kind of summarize. We have a program called the Downtown Loan Program, and that's available. And we budget for it. And if we have money in that account, we can make loans. And we do have a balance in that account. Usually budget for anticipating doing 1 or 2 loans. The emergency fund is on page 88. And this is a program for low and moderate income households who may have an emergency need, like heating in the middle of winter or no water or water service. We do have a fund balance in that account. And again, if we have money in the account, which we do, Christine just confirmed we have money in that account. So then we do make those loans. I'm happy to, I don't mean to rush through. I can go through each item and unless you have questions, I will point out the city rehab fund on page 83. That's our housing programs. And we are in the process of closing out our housing grants this year. That's another reason for the position pausing for a little bit. So we'll close those grants out, continue to research opportunities, and hopefully have someone back in place to implement some new programs soon.
So basically, we're spending the 21,000 to help try to maintain that grant revenue.
Or to seek out new grants
Yep.
and have some help in doing that.
Okay.
The inspection fund begins on page 185, if there's no other questions. Excuse me, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pam.
I have a question. I was just looking at this to see if I should understand it, and I really don't. So back on page 71, we're talking about other purchased services. And so unexpected, unbudgeted. What is that category, Lucy?
So that's not a community development budget. I believe that's a contingency fund.
I'll cover
Oh.
that.
Oh, okay.
I'll
I'm
cover that.
sorry. Wrong page.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like it, but no. So
They all covet that money. That's mine.
I tried to quote something there once, it got rejected. So on page 185, what we do in inspections, if you look to our revenue in 2020 and 2021, and you will see it's estimated a little bit lower this year. You have to remember, we did have a couple of very high and unusual years, so we try to budget the revenue very conservatively. And that's what we're doing here with our permits. We are down 1 inspector at this time. One of our new inspectors got a job. It is included in the budget, but we have not filled it yet. We're going to kind of see how our site plans and construction goes before we would make that move and would consult prior to doing that.
Lucy, have we seen a dip in numbers of inspections since last year? I know like last year was a crazy year for people working on their houses and doing all that stuff.
We're still very busy. Are we as busy as the 300 roof permits from the hailstorm? No,
Okay,
1 event away from that probably.
sure.
But
Okay.
we are very busy, and again, we're down 1 person, and so the workload is definitely being dispersed, but we're able to do our complaints,
Yep,
junk and houses and rental. and
enforcement
building.
piece on it,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, so we should expect that number to kind of fluctuate as weather events happen. So if we have
That's part of it,
Yeah.
and if we have a few really big projects
Okay.
that can generate a pretty high permit.
sure, okay,
So we've had that with Main Square, Fastenal.
Yep.
Cod or St. Mary's,
Sure.
to name a few.
Yep.
So that made it go up.
Okay.
So the revenues are on page 187. And then our expenses are on page 188, 189. We do training. Our inspectors, this is halfway down on page 188. They have to maintain their licensure, so we do budget for education and travel. We are learning more and more that can be done remotely, but some hands-on is still definitely helpful. I have some money in what's called Energov training. That's our software. Later, Jessica and Brad will note, we're going to be having an upgrade to that system. So we'll need some training. So
Okay.
happy to answer any other questions.
Mayor,
Go ahead, George.
I think the inspections department is doing a very, very good job, and I'm trying to help them out as well by not calling in my 50 complaints a week. I'm knocking that down to 30.
I'm sure they appreciate that, George.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can say when I'm down in inspections, it's pretty rare that I see an inspector in there. They're usually popping in and popping back out right away.
Yeah. So. Are there any questions on inspection? Trying to stay on time. Next, we have Port Authority, and I will go through the Port Authority budget. So within the Port Authority budget, we have quite a few funds. It begins on page 209. On 209, what you have is the Port Authority General Fund. We do have a proposed tax levy, both for that fund and also for the airport bonds that the Port Authority issued. At the top of page 210, we show all of our Port Authority rents. So the Port Authority does generate income from our harbor and from our dock on unloading fees on the top of page 210.
Can I ask what Artco is?
Artco is a division of ADM, the
Okay.
grain company,
Gotcha.
and they fleet the barges
Yep.
in the harbor.
Yep.
So we don't want a lot of people doing that. They would crash. So we license with one vendor to move the barges about.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead.
just if I could ask you, I see a substantial increase in your projected revenue on unloading fees from 239 actual and 220 up to 280.
So right now, this year, we're improving our west dock. Our rent on that, the lump sum was $35,000. We anticipate with that new dock, which is costing over $1 million, we can ask for more rent.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Hey, make improvements, raise your rent. I get it.
Brilliant.
Any other questions? Our expenses, again, we use engineers, professional services. I should note on the top of page 211, we also did, the Port Authority reviewed this budget, by the way, and recommended it to council. They did include Main Street. We have been a part of funding Main Street since they were started, and the Port Authority thinks that the downtown is very important and worth funding.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
could I?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Lucy, Port reimburses your staff time. Was it 75% that I was understanding?
Right, so 75% of the whole community development budget, and that includes Nick and myself. And then they actually pay for a portion of city manager, finance director, and
Okay.
city engineer.
Okay, paid for by the port. Thank you. Thank you. That must be line 3404, page 211.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you, thank you, thank you.
So it's an expense to the port,
Yep.
but a revenue to the general fund.
Got it.
Mayor, I would so move tentative approval to all the departments that Lucy and Carlos touched on.
Second.
We have a motion from George. I'll give the second to Steve this time. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Just to clarify, that includes all the port funds?
Yes,
They
yes,
just-
Port
okay.
Authority as
Thank you.
well.
Thank you, Lucy.
Good work.
Chief Williams,
Thank you.
welcome.
Good evening. Before we get into the actual line items, I just want to touch on a couple of items that may be in the line item, but I also want to give them a little bit of added value. As we go through the budget, several things that we have been able to do at the police department is we're currently on track with outfitting our officers with body worn cameras. For those of you who don't know, we do not currently have body worn cameras. However, we do have in-car cameras. Those in-car cameras have also reached end of life. So we will be purchasing body cameras and in-car cameras that are going to be on the same platform, which will make it much easier for the officers as well as the people on the back end to put all the data information into one spot and share it with the county attorney and the city attorney as well. We had a group of 7 officers that sat in through the vetting process on the selection of this. So they were vested in selecting the vendor that was going to provide the best equipment for their needs. We've also been looking at trying to get this digital data extraction for cell phones. We've been asking for that for a couple of years. It's a very expensive item to get. However, we've partnered with the Winona County Sheriff's Office, and the Sheriff's Department has a piece of equipment called Cellbrite, which does extraction of data out of the cell phones. And we have opted to go with a data extraction known as Gray Key, and they actually partnered together that allow us to get more data out of cell phones. So with that partnership, it's going to provide obviously better product for not only the city of Winona County, but the other agencies such as Goodview, Lewiston, and St. Charles. So we're able to get that, not the complete package, but by working with the sheriff's office, we're able to get both. Our MDTs are our mobile data terminals, the computers that are in the squad cars. Those have also reached their end of life. And we've started vetting again the process on that. The numbers are looking very good. So we put preliminary numbers into the budget that are actually going to be out of our operating expenses and hopefully won't end up in the CIP for years to come. And they'll just be renewed because, as we all know, technology expires faster than what we really want to admit.
Yeah.
Although we are not going to be replacing an officer, that did not affect our COO officers or our community outreach officers. We're maintaining those 2 positions. Again, I can't sing the praises of the officers that are assigned to that particular position. We have probably been pointed out by the state of Minnesota in terms of predatory offenders as somewhat of the model agency now in terms of how they are handling that and making sure that all the people that are on the registry are in compliance in the city of Winona. They're also out there with human services. They're out there talking to neighbors. They're developing leads and tips that otherwise wouldn't happen because they have the time and they have the ability to go out and just sit and talk with people. So that's what we're still promoting that. We're obviously trying to trickle that down into the uniform division as well and the investigative division to get out there and take the time and spend the time with the community to try and build those relationships.
Steve, did you have a question?
If we can go back to, you were talking about the cell phone thing. Is this like being able to examine the contents of a phone that's entered into evidence without the passcode or my beautiful face turning it on?
That is correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Trying to understand.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that, we can move to revenues unless there's any questions.
George, go ahead.
Just a comment, Chief. All 4 of the people that have served as COO officers have done one excellent job. you know, through the housing that I'm involved with, they do well, and they do it quietly. They do it quietly, so.
And Brad Barrientos was promoted to sergeant, and Anita was promoted, Sabota was promoted to investigator. So that kind of helps give you an idea of the work that they're doing in that position as well. So I appreciate that, and I'll pass it along to them.
Thank you.
So our revenues are pretty thin. We have pet licenses. For that, obviously, that fluctuates considerably. We put $8,000 in there. I was kind of hoping with COVID that things would stay true to form as it did in our household, that people would buy a lot of pets because they didn't have anything to do. But unfortunately, we haven't seen the fruits of that yet. So
Okay,
something to keep the kids busy while they were home from school. Police training reimbursement. Again, this is something that comes through the state. And there's a crazy formula that I don't fully understand, but basically what we do is we take our expenses, send it up to the state of Minnesota. They throw everybody's reports from the state into a bucket, and then they divide it out. I put it at $20,000 because I didn't know for sure if people would have a significant amount of out of city training. Obviously, hotels, meals, fuel, those are added expenses, and just about all the training was online. So I put 20 in there to see what we would come out with. Hopefully it'll be significantly more. And by significant, I mean maybe 15,000. The next one would be fines, court fines. Again, that is a formula that is provided by the state of Minnesota, where every traffic ticket that is written on a state ticket, certain percentages go to each different agencies. Money goes to the law library, money goes to the local agency, money goes to the state, of course. And again, that is based on the number of tickets that are written, state tickets that are written by the officers in the city of Winona. That is determined by court admin, and they cut us a check and drop it in there. Left that at approximately $70,000. And then parking fines is another one of those things that fluctuates. The main revenue generated from parking fines is our alternate side parking. We have a horrible winter with lots of snow events and vehicles being towed and being ticketed citywide. Obviously, that drives those revenues up. With COVID and the shutdown of businesses and that type of thing, our downtown parking revenues were obviously low. Parking enforcement was not done. People weren't out. There weren't a lot of violations because the businesses were closed. And we had somewhat of a mild winter. We still run at about 2,100 alternate side parking tickets a year, and that's been fairly consistent. However, we do not collect on all 2,100 because we have such a large student population that they just don't pay it and then they move. So it's difficult to get those collected. Any questions on any of the revenues in terms of parking fines, tickets, reimbursement?
nope.
Okay, if we move to department expenditures, salaries are salaries, as I already alluded to. We opted not to replace an officer, and that was based on the loss of the revenue from School District 861 when they decided to remove the school resource officer from the high school. So that was just a position that is not going to be filled.
Was that considered an investigative position?
Yes, that was an investigative position.
Thank you.
If we go down, we can look at clothing allowance. If you look at 2232, that is vest reimbursement for the officers. Every 5 years, they are reissued a new ballistic vest for their wearing.
And those are fitted, so they can't be transferred between officers. Is that correct? Or
For the most part, they're
Okay.
not like tailor fitted. There's small, medium, and large.
Okay.
But they will come in and make the ballistic panels for the officer as well as the carrier that then goes in there. And to be honest with you, you really don't want to wear a vest that somebody else has been
Understood.
wearing.
Yeah. And then the new cameras will fit into these vests that we're using currently.
The vendor that they selected It's actually very, very neat and very tidy. They actually punch a hole in the uniform shirt or the external vest carrier of the officer. And then the camera sits in a mounting system on the back side of the garment and sits in there. So it then takes the view is the hole in the shirt. So probably 95% of people won't even realize that the officer has a camera on, and it's not this large box that can get knocked off in a tussle or in a foot pursuit. It's not going to fall off when you obviously need it.
Sure.
So when we get closer to that, we'll maybe do a pre-council and have the vendor come in and give a demonstration.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Lab testing for DWIs, those are for blood draws. Some of the big items underneath total property service would be telephone. Obviously, we have a significant amount of data that's going through our mobile data terminals in the squad cars. Each one of those have to have a separate air card. Each car also has a cell phone. Our investigative staff has cell phones assigned to them, and administrative staff does as well. That cost goes up. We currently switched, or we just recently switched over to AT&T FirstNet. They were a little bit less expensive than Verizon. Their coverage was the same. However, they are able to elevate in times of an emergency to provide law enforcement or emergency services coverage solely. So they elevate us against above the other users. Education and travel, state mandated training. Again, officers have to go through 48 hours of continuing education in the 3 years during their post licensure time. And again, they're mandating more and more training for officers every year. So that has gone up. Our LEC city share, I estimated at $170,000. That's what we pay Winona County for the use of the current law enforcement center with dispatch, jail, and the record services. If you look at purchase services, the investigative fund for the Southeast Minnesota, that's our investigator that's assigned to the Southeast Minnesota Violent Crime Enforcement Team. We pay that task force for membership to that. They provide vehicle, radio. They pay out of jurisdiction overtime and those types of things. Police licenses are $90 a year at a third of the department every year. Lexapol at $12,000. That's our online policy manual that is serviced by the company called Lexapol that keeps up to date on state and federal mandates, and they push out those changes as they become available. So in June, we got an immediate update on use of force that was then pushed out to the department. Range supplies, our ammunition is expensive and very hard to get. If you go into Fleet Farm or any other sporting goods store, you'll notice that the shelves where the ammunition are basically bare because ammunition is in very short supply. Under 6119, the operating supplies, that's a very large item of 194,000. But within that is the switchover of a police squad car at about $30,000. They very expensive to equip the car. Squad laptops, printers, and mounts. We moved that into the line item under the operating budget, as I alluded to in the first part of the presentation, that we're going to be looking at spending that type of money over the next 5 years as a line item to increase to pay for our laptops. The in-car body camera and in-car cameras, those are also included. We did apply for 2 grants on that. We're waiting to hear back to see if we were successful on those or not. The digital forensic equipment is also the item I mentioned that's called that gray key. Gasoline is the unknown as well. Small equipment is just if we have issues at the LEC with tables or chairs and that type of thing that we just need to replace. And our vehicles, we moved the vehicles. We had originally looked at having 0 vehicles and then 3, and then we decided we would go 1 and 2. So that item moved from 123 down to $41,000. So our overall budget would be, if approved, would be 6.2, which is less than our 2020 actual budget.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
If it's all right, yeah. So, okay, so we went from 3 and we were gonna pay those out of the equipment fund, and it was the 3 vehicles. And we decided to pay it out of recurring general revenue because those things just continually get used up. And we went from 3 police cruisers to 1. Help me, is that reflected in that line 6119? Is that the substantial decrease there from 264,000 to 194,000? 6119.
That would be the equipping those other 2 cars,
Oh, okay. So we're not equipping those cars
not the other 2 because they're
Thank
not
you.
in the,
because it was 30,000 each to equip each car.
correct.
Okay, 60. Okay. What line is are the police cruisers in? Where are they? Or where's the 1?
Next page. I
That's
think.
on the 7402 under vehicles.
Got it. Thank you.
And if I could just touch on something very briefly as wellness. We've had started the initiative. Deputy Chief Rasmussen has kind of made this his project. It's called Checkup from the Neck Up, where each officer will be required to go through at least one time a year to speak with a wellness professional and kind of get a baseline of where they're at. And then that wellness professional will also have the officers will have the ability to speak with them if they want more than that one time. They'll also be available for debriefing on any critical incidents that the officers are required to respond to. Any deaths or hostage situations, something of that magnitude. We have also worked with Winona State University. Connie Mattil provided some training for us down at the East End Rec to help identify some mental health issues and that type of thing. So again, those are becoming mandates from the state of Minnesota as well. And as true to form, they're unfunded mandates. So they're saying you need to have X amount of credits, if you will, for training and put these types of things in place. So Deputy Chief Rasmussen has identified a provider locally who has agreed to provide services to the police and fire department. And we're just in the beginning stages of rolling that out. And we have $8,000 allocated for next year.
And that should be sufficient.
We're hoping so based on her rates and the number of opportunities for the officers to speak with.
What is her accreditation or what is her?
She's a psychiatrist out of La Crosse.
Okay, very good. George?
Chief, when we were up to Fridley, is this the same program that they have? So I think we talked about that.
Yes, it's the same program. We actually tried to get the same professional that they had. However, she said that she most likely will not be taking new clients for probably a year due to the influx of all the departments in the metro.
Any other questions? Okay,
I would move tentative approval of the police department budget.
Second.
we have a motion from George. We'll take a second from Pam. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Good job, chief.
Tough year,
Yes, very, very.
fire and police.
Mayor and council will start with several sections. I'll go over kind of what each area is doing as far as projects as we get to each of those areas, because I've got several areas obviously within my section. But we'll start with revenues on page 2. First item that I want to point out is on top of page 2, it's 101-32-219. This is the Winona Tour Boat lease. So Mr. Pinsky's boat is in here. And then further down within the revenue on page 4, you'll also see midway at 209, we've got the docking agreement with Winona State as revenue coming in to the general fund. Now, one piece that I want to point out that I mentioned to Jessica that we need to adjust in this budget, it's a small amount, but nonetheless necessary. Because we actually now have an agreement with the American Cruise Line for their multiple dockings per year, we need to add the revenue for American Cruise Lines into the budget. It'll be a small amount, but it's something. I mean, it's something we should note. And so we'll add that before September. It will be roughly between $4,000 and $5,000.
Okay.
So again, important, but not reflected in this current form. Further down, actually, sorry, if we can flip back to page 3. At the bottom of the page, 36,401, that's camping fees. We did do a slight increase from actually 2019. You're not quite seeing that in the line items, but it used to be 185. We just did a minor adjustment, but we're seeing obviously an increase at the campground. The usage is up. We'll discuss fees here coming to the council mid-September. We may look at a nominal fee adjustment. Certainly we didn't want to do that coming out of the pandemic. Now, again, maybe staying in the pandemic, I'm not sure that we also want to do that. But we are certainly seeing the usage go up there. And again, those camping fees come into general fund. The idea at this point is that those revenues help pay for park maintenance and really the maintenance that we do out at the campground.
Chad, a couple of questions. Are the electrical improvements down at Prairie Island, are those all paid for?
Mayor and council, the electrical improvements at Prairie Island from the large project are paid for.
Okay.
We have seen a few sites that we've kind of onesie twosie improved,
Okay.
but the main project is paid for, correct?
Okay, great. And then another question, and I don't mean this in any way whatsoever, other than I'd like to recognize what Front Porch has done. Have we seen a revenue increase since Front Porch has taken over?
Mayor and council, I would, I guess, use the adjective we've definitely seen. I'm not sure substantial is the right word, but we certainly have seen an increase in revenue.
Okay.
Probably more importantly, the system to take the reservations has improved. Now we pay a fee for that, but the reports that we're getting back, and again, that's not reflective of the previous operator, but it's certainly helped with reporting how we do more permanent sites versus non-electric versus
there's more detail.
Seasonal, there's more
reporting.
detail. And so
Yeah.
I think we're getting a better picture as well.
Sure.
So not only are we seeing, more camping fees come in, we're getting also better reporting back to the department as well. Now, again, we've invested in that system. We help pay for it. So
Yep. Understood.
it kind of offsets, but it certainly has helped from more of the accounting side.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, that's the primary revenue for general fund. The other item that I'm responsible for is on page 12, the Fine Arts Commission. Just want to note that you'll see a reduction in this budget. Obviously, in 2020 and 2021, we were working on the arts plan. Well, we still currently are working on the arts plan. And so you'll see this budget back to what I would call its 2019, 2018 amounts. So small budget, $3,000 for Fine Arts Commission. Moving to page 30. Building maintenance. There's a couple things that I want to point out with building maintenance. Building maintenance is a small department. They do primary maintenance at City Hall, the Masonic Temple, and library. They do assist in other areas throughout the city if needed, sometimes floor work. Sometimes we'll do boiler checks, things like that through this department. One of the areas that we're really trying to focus on this year and into next year is security at City Hall. And so I won't go into a lot of details about that because it's security for City Hall, but we continue to upgrade our exterior access, some interior access, cameras within the facility. And that's really become a focus of building maintenance. As an example, we had a small incident outside of City Hall after we left last night. I think we feel a sense of security because we have good cameras outside. But we continue also to work on our internal protocols for safety as well. Just, Steve and Jessica and I did a brief sweep of the building last night. We, left together, short of me walking Jessica to her car, things like that, locking our doors in certain cases. We're trying to work on that, and it's a focus really coming out of building maintenance because, again, they oversee this building. So it's a project that we're working on currently and that we continue to hope to do in 2022. You're not going to see a specific line item in this budget for that security. We do that within some of the supplies that are in the current budget, and or if we are able, we will encumber some of the funds that we actually have in 21 to increase security into 2022. The other piece that I know will come up later, and then maybe based on the attendance tonight, we may have to postpone. But building maintenance, of course, will be heavily involved if we decide to move forward with the Masonic Temple HVAC. So they're kind of the day-to-day. Certainly I oversee that project, but their day-to-day getting the building prepared for that project, and of course overseeing the sort of the day-to-day pieces of that project that would go forward. So those are the things that there's some projects that may be in the future for building maintenance.
Mayor?
George, and then Steve will get you.
Just one question, and you can clarify this for me as well too. Now, with the air conditioning unit over at Masonic Lodge, and is there something tied to the funding that the senior center has to be in there in order to get something for the air conditioning? I thought I heard.
Mayor and council, no. Whether the Friendship Center would still operate out of that building or not, this project looks at all floors. And again, meaning basement for units to be housed, supply to first floor, supply to second floor, supply to third floor, whether or not the Friendship Center continues to operate there. In this budget, and in I'm sure you saw within Steve's letter that we had discussed that we'll pursue American Recovery Act funding for this project to see if it qualifies. I think we have some early indications that that's looking to be positive. But that funding also is not, I'm not aware that it's tied to any Friendship Center use. So.
Because the city still owns the building, and whether the senior Friendship Center is in there or not, it's still a city building.
Correct.
And the ARPA money, the justification would be you need to be able to operate out of that entire building, and the air handling obviously supports being able to do that. The one thing that we're talking about is the community center project versus Masonic. As we saw the use of the community center for vaccination clinics, we used it for the power outage that affected the West End when the train backed into the truck and took the power line out. Even though no one went over there, we were able to activate that within probably 20 minutes. So we had a warming shelter for people because that was a particularly cold evening. So again, we'll be bringing this back to council for further discussion and action, whether you want to support moving forward with that, seek another funding stream. or just, what action you want to take.
Go ahead, Steve.
I need clarity, and so help me. We're considering using how much money for HVAC for the Masonic? What's the amount? Where is it?
So we, construction latest estimate is 1.6 million.
Okay.
And again, I'm rounding. We need to pay back in some form if we so choose, because again, depends on the funding source, the design engineering fees for that project.
Because we've already done that.
Correct. And that's in the neighborhood of between 160 and 180 when we're all said and done. And then again, if we want a little bit of a contingency for construction prices, the way they're fluctuating, then we need to adjust for that as well.
Gotcha. So I guess what I'm puzzled, this 1.6 million, that's not small money. We're considering, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're considering building a community center. In fact, it's in our CIP, where we would likely, the plan would be to move the seniors to, so we'd be spending 1.6 million on HVAC for a vacant building.
Mayor and Council, again, Masonic Temple, the long-range plan, I think the arts plan will focus on this, is that then the Masonic Temple would become more of the community arts venue, so that the second floor and the investments we've made in the second floor then could be used as a venue event space. Friendship Center is out. We certainly still need more discussion of what's going to exactly happen on that first floor. But again, I think the plan, at least for the last several years, is to have that be more of a community event space.
Yeah. And again, I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but when I look at that kind of money, I'd like to see that we have a plan going forward for Masonic before I want to spend that. I'd rather spend that kind of money rehabbing our library. I hear we have tuck pointing, if I'm looking at maintenance needs and wonderful buildings, we just had a discussion last night that our library needs maintenance money. So I'm reluctant to spend a big chunk of money, $1.6 million on an HVAC system. I'm speaking for myself, on a building that is low use and possibly empty when we have a library that really needs it. Maybe I'm out of line, but help me.
The problem is the funding, the use of those funds.
Okay.
And the way the federal government has designed that funding and for what it can be used for.
Okay.
That's the problem. I don't think tuck pointing would work under that scenario.
Okay. So what of this ARPA money, this is federal money, what portion of the 1.6 is ours? We must have a cost share in this.
No, we would use it all.
It's free money, right?
Well,
No.
Okay.
no.
Okay, I'm teasing.
Yes.
The old free money.
I guess it's really, staff needs to bring forward the plan to show you that the space will be utilized. It's not going to be an empty building.
Yeah.
And if council agrees, we own the building.
Yeah.
So it's a question of, you can't use it during a significant portion of the year because of the air situation.
It is an asset.
So if we are going to utilize it, the question is, where do you come up with $1.8 million? We have this money as one option. The other is the bond or find some other way of doing it. I guess our feeling is council should consider all of those, but we can't really have that final discussion until we've had the final plan update to council and we bring forward what we think is going to be the uses of that facility.
I just have a hard time spending money on a building. And I don't know the rules, and I don't pretend to know the rules about what we can and can't spend it on. But, and I guess I like OPM, other people's money. But,
And again, we can't give you 100% clarity.
okay.
There's, we think probably the first thing we ought to be doing is reimbursing ourselves for lost revenue wherever we can.
Yeah.
That was caused by the pandemic. And then we need to look at what's left over and prioritize. Would it go into a project like this so we didn't take on debt? Or do we look at other uses for the funds? But The other uses seem to be sewer and water.
Okay.
And while we've got projects for that, we've also got funds that are got really healthy balances.
Mhm. Steve, I think, I'll just throw in my 2 cents here. I think you have to look at what the potential is for that building, whether the programming, the, who we can house in there, who we can, what can we do with that building? If it's a city asset, we need to try and protect it. If you don't HVAC a building, it's as bad as not tuck pointing a building, because eventually you're going to get some deterioration of that city asset that we need to protect at some point. So some of the things that I've heard batted around throughout the arts plan and other conversations, it seems like long-term, we'll really be able to utilize that building thoroughly. And the one thing that's hindering us from doing that right now is HVAC, as far as I can see. It stinks that we have to put that much into some sheet metal and a furnace and, some air conditioners and stuff like that. But I think ultimately, at least the way I'm looking at it, it's an investment into a city asset to protect it more than anything else.
If there's a plan I could see, I could be much more supportive.
Absolutely.
But absent a plan, I have a hard time spending.
Yep,
money.
absolutely. Understood.
Okay. All right.
Eileen?
I just wanted to add on to that, just as someone who works in the arts and event programming, that there are many organizations in our city that would love to use that building and would have it lights on most of the year, but it is unbearable for most of the year. We also, if and when we are building our new community center, that's not going to be an instant, there it is. And now the seniors, or now the Friendship Center is done at the Masonic and it's empty. I mean, that's going to take a lot of time to make those changes to that building. And there are programs that happen in East End Rec that are likely going to be displaced during any construction period. So where are they going to go? We talk about the library. One of the major needs of the library has been for many years that we have no place for teens in this community to gather. Now, if the city owned a building that was functional and air conditioned and had large gathering space, it's just a short walk from the library for the teens to be able to gather and program that space. So like the mayor said, making sure that that building is bearable for the majority of the year is crucial to being able to generate revenue from it, whether or not it's our own programs. I know my organization, we just searched for a new office, and we used to have an office in the Masonic and they moved because you couldn't work in there. And that's revenue that the city lost. Now, if it was air conditioned, I would have been jumping for joy that we could use that cool building. And I know that that's been a major point of discussion among arts organizations, that there is interest in just paying the city to use that building, and then the city wouldn't have to program it or anything. But it has to be livable first. And so I think that, as the mayor said, if we own buildings, we need to maintain them. We can't just let them fall into disrepair. And there is interest in using that building.
The potential, I think, regardless if it's arts or another program, there's potential in that building and we can utilize it, I think. And maybe outside the city utilizes it, through other opportunities, but yeah, it's a tough spot.
Mayor and Council, I will interject this thought. And Steve, it just came to me when you were saying plans. And I think when we bring back the HVAC plan, which is now done, and we have a pre-council meeting, or if it's during the council meeting, I'll make a concerted effort to go through the HSR.
What's an HSR?
Yep. So I think what's good for the newer members of council is that you can see that we did a plan for the historic renovation of this building. And I should go through that plan with the council again. Because I think it's really important. 2 notes is maybe going back and doing some brief history, not the full history of the Mason Temple, but some recent history of the Mason Temple. 2 reasons. One, because the city has invested in a lot of money in that building to date, the roof and the support beams on the 2nd floor and the tuck pointing. And And so there's been some, and well, of course, the theatrical upgrades. So I think walking through that historic structures report also helps frame the plan. That's part one. And then part two, I think it's also important is this is good discussion to have, because I think there's been some discussion about, well, let's just get this HVAC done and wrap that building up. There's several more components to that building that need work. But this is not the end. And the HSR shows that there's other things that building is going to need. We're going to put new HVAC in, and we still have windows that don't open and close. That's not necessarily a good starting point when you put a new HVAC system in. So I hear you. I think that maybe what we need to do through the HVAC then is also do this brief history and review the historic structures reports. You get not only the programming side, but then what is the city building that we own? What are we responsible for in the near future as well? So.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Mayor, just.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, thanks, Chad, for that, because that was going through my mind too. I mean, since we've had that building, we have stuck millions of dollars in it and we're getting nothing out of it. We had a gentleman here approach us 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He would have taken that building over if we could have worked with him maybe a little better to have it accommodated. That money would have been put into that building and it would not been at the taxpayer's expense. But like I say, I hope we get something going because, we're putting money in. There's not a business in town that's going to invest 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, wondering if, somebody's going to buy it or not. But like I said, the people want the building. I sided with the people. Now, like I said, let's get the building up and going. So. Thank
Last
you.
comment is the Masonic Temple. I'll just reference it one more time when we go. It's actually in the recreation budget. I mentioned it because of building maintenance, but it's actually in the recreation budget. I'll note it. And again, obviously future discussion. So. Okay. The next section is park maintenance. That starts on page 64.
What page?
64.
64.
Okay.
Some projects that park maintenance is working on. I guess that I would lead off that my number one goal for park maintenance next year is to make sure Marty Mullen doesn't retire. That's the number one project. If you don't know Marty, he's the park superintendent. He is an outstanding worker and he has an outstanding crew of workers and part-time workers at park maintenance. They do a fabulous job at making our parks look the way they do. The pandemic, I think I've mentioned this to council before, I don't have any empirical data because we don't have a good way of really tracking park usage, but our park usage went through the roof during the pandemic. And one way we anecdotally can track that is we didn't pick up this much garbage ever in the history of the park system. And that's the anecdotal data. It was intense and the crew did an outstanding job of keeping the parks clean. The other thing that maybe isn't all that attractive either is we had to add an extra day to have our porta potties cleaned during the pandemic. So we add an additional day of cleaning service for all of our porta potties because they were heavily used. And it's a good indication that people were out and about using the park system. So obviously that was one impact of the pandemic. Some things that park maintenance will be working on next year, or maybe perhaps the end of this year, is we are going to re-roof the gazebo at Wyndham Park. I note that because we need to go through a historical review and make sure that we're replacing that roofing on that gazebo adequately. Park maintenance will also be helping with the band shell review in preparation for the centennial in 2024, construction likely in 2023. But again, they'll have some work to do to get the site prepped for that. Again, Levy Park is in its, believe it or not, it'll be in its 5th year. We're starting to see some of those, 5th year type of this valve go out, splash pad Not all the fountains were working this year. So we have some maintenance that we need to do before this winter and then into the spring on that item. We are doing some additional signage in Agameen Park because of the Flyway Trail. And we're going to look to do some parking near the boat club. The boat club is, Winona Boat Club has at least given us tentative approval to add some parking there for users so they're not on Agameen Road. And then again, may seem odd. We certainly have been maintaining this area for several years, but we do need to relook from a function of park maintenance at doing some more maintenance underneath the bridge. And it's what I would call more routine maintenance. And we've been doing it. We do the sweeping but Chris Kramer specifically wants us to just take another look at that with some of the tree plantings and then some just general maintenance there. So that's some, I guess what I would call some projects that we'll be working on in 2022.
Mayor,
George.
with the fish and fish and wildlife managing that area, wouldn't they need to provide the signs, or that's something that we still need to expense?
Mayor and Council, good question. Because the Flyway Trail is right on the edge and outside of the agreement area, we do the signage for that facility. So really, Fish and Wildlife manages everything from the Flyway Trail east. Good segue, because the park maintenance budget is relatively similar to years past, but there are two items that I do want to point up because they were mentioned specifically last night. On the bottom, toward the bottom of page 66 in 7309, you'll see that we do have the Sam Gordy's Agameen project in for 8,000. Now, Steve, you had asked that question, I think, during the budget process, or during the council action item that came forward in 2021, earlier this year. We did place it in the 2022 budget because we feel, as I mentioned last night, that Wisconsin DNR likely is not going to start that project till late fall. Our payment wouldn't be due till 2022. So instead of using 2021 funds or encumbering it, we did put it in the 2022 budget.
It's the silt diversion. It's the silt diversion.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Eileen?
Chad, you might be discussing this. What part of the Sobieski Park Court is getting upgraded? Or that was 2021. I'm not looking at this correctly.
You're looking at that correctly. Sobieski Park Court is in the 2022 budget at 80,000 as a total project.
Okay. So are those basketball, tennis?
Our goal is to take the tennis courts out.
Okay.
Take tennis courts and basketball court out. And what we'd put back in would be 2 pickleball courts and 1 basketball court. So tennis, in theory, tennis would be gone from that site.
Okay. I know you just mentioned it's hard to tell how much parks are used other than, context or clues. But is that our most used park?
Sobieski is not the most used. I mean, Lake Park, obviously, I think that probably goes without saying, is the heaviest used park. I will say this about Sobieski hard courts, though, that we've noticed. We have seen a significant increase in the rental because of the facility, and people ask about the use of the courts or if it's tied to the rental. So that's, again, anecdotal data that I have of people just asking, hey, is there other ancillary? Is that court redone? Can we play on it? That type of thing. But Lake Park is our, east-west.
Yep.
Lake Park is our heaviest used area.
Okay. I just, if it's used and that's what we need to do, then I'm okay with that. But I will say what I always say, which is that we have lost some play spaces on the west side of town, and I'm not really seeing anything to address losing those.
So We hear that a lot. We're well aware. I think two things. One, Sobieski, we're hoping that we can get a large donation for this project and that we do have at least an interested donor in fixing this court. So there is some, half, we have it listed here as half donation, half currently coming from the park fund. I know you don't see it here, but I would note that if you look over to the second from the right column, we did propose 829,000. And within that 829,000 were two West End projects. They were taken out along with a lot of other projects.
Right.
Okay.
Steve, you had a question?
All right, that is one of my questions right there, because I was noting $741,000 difference. So it's a couple projects. Are they in the CIP? I don't need long detail, but Chad, you're thinking that these we may see these back in future years. Is that right?
Mayor and council, I hope so.
Okay.
All those items are, park facilities that need a lot of work or that we hear a lot of questions about. And again, I won't go over a lot of details, but
yeah,
I'm going to. I'll try and go fast. I mean, it's Sobieski Park Courts, it's docking renovations. I know got a couple council members that have talked about all of our docks within our system. PI restrooms, the Rose Garden, again, we got a donation. It's currently sitting. Gabrick Park Field, again, home plate doesn't match the pitching mound. We have the Valley Oaks playground replacement, but again, we did push that back based on, again, West End. Play space was also included in that. Prairie Island Camp Store, again, is 80% underwater. We had gotten asked to put in community garden funding. We took that out. We had the Prairie Island Natural Resources Management Plan that was taken out. Sugarloaf parking, we think might happen with the Mankato roundabout. That'll be extremely exciting. So I'm hoping that stays in with the Mankato roundabout project. And we did put an allocation in for Westfield parking lot. Now, again, the agreement doesn't necessarily say that we have to cover that. We did place it in the budget because we feel that if Westfield doesn't fix that parking lot, we may have a liability issue on our hands, even though that it is leased out. It still is our facility. We still own it. Parking lot's in rough shape. So those are the quick projects. Again, I hope we can find a funding stream to fund those in the future.
Okay, thank you. Going back to the Sobieski Park there, you had mentioned there's a possible donation. Currently, so whatever portion that's not donated would be the city's expense, and that's coming from park revolving?
That's correct.
It's a new account.
Correct.
Without a lot of money in it.
Does not.
Okay, wouldn't that be better off with that coming from facilities?
Mayor and council, I think because the park fund is new and because there is not a large balance, I'd prefer that it come out of the facility fund.
Okay.
If you want to direct us to do that, you
I'd
certainly can.
like to move that we do that. It sounds like you have some confidence that a substantial donation is coming through. Okay, I'd like to move that we that expense come instead from facilities instead of park revolving.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, question. So which expense are we moving from, or are we planning to pay for with the different fund? What exactly are you talking about?
Sobieski?
Sobieski?
Yes, I'm sorry.
The
The
hard court?
80,000 Sobieski net, whatever donation comes.
So Mayor and Council, this is what we call a budget neutral item. So we would have 40,000 of revenue coming from facility fund if we would get $40,000 in donations. So it's a budget neutral item. There's no tax levy tied to this project. If we don't get the donation, we don't do the project.
Yep.
So I should have clarified that to start. What Councilman Young motion was that originally we had placed we had discussed taking 40,000 of city dollars from the park revolving reserve fund. Because the balance, it's the new fund, there's roughly 106,000 in there. I mean, we're taking more than half of that, well, close to half of that fund just for this project. So if you're in agreement, I don't disagree that taking that small amount of the facility fund seems prudent.
Got it. Thank you.
Let me ask you this before I vote. What are the pros and cons to either doing it the way we have set up in here versus pulling it from facilities fund?
Mayor and council, I think, again, not sure how the favorable budget balances will go in the future years, but I think I'd like the park fund to be more established before we start taking funds out of it. You know, taking smaller amounts, smaller percentages seems logical, but
Like $2, $3 grand, $4
Right.
grand at a time. Okay.
right, but to take 40% of it at one time, again, even though it generates potential donation money, I think I'd like to see that account get a healthier balance before we start taking things out of it.
Eileen?
I'm in support of that. I'm just curious how much, if we know how much is in the facility fund.
Yeah, a reference there.
And then while you're looking at that, maybe Chad can answer my other question, which is if whomever is donating this money doesn't donate what we think they're going to, like if instead of 40,000, they donate 10 or 20, are we then spending
60 versus
60 or
40.
70?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
oh, sorry, go ahead.
The balance in the facilities fund is $2,561,002.
Okay,
We would bring that project back, even if it was exactly the way we said it was going to be. We'll still bring it back to let you know that we could receive the donation, what the amount was and what the match will be.
okay. In the future, in years like this, when we are really limited on what projects we can do, I would really prefer if we try to distribute them equally throughout the city. The East End, George, has some really lovely facilities, and I feel like the ones on the west side keep disappearing. And there are lots of families who cannot easily access a park at all. And I just think we need to be a little bit more equitable about which facilities we fund.
I do think in fairness, Sobieski neighborhood, the East End, there's folks there that are going out and seeking funding sources. If we can do the same thing on the West End, again, any opportunity we can to find an alternate source to cover a portion of the project. As I've told the staff this year, especially, that's where we want to be. So if somebody wants to come forward with a fundraising plan and needs us to step in to do the balance, that's what we want to bring forward to the council.
Yes, yeah, and I don't want to be dismissive of the efforts of the neighbors, because that's really significant, and definitely it's appreciated. But we're doing matches for those things, and I get the buy-in, and that's important.
And we would definitely do the same in the West. It doesn't matter what part of town. We need to find some champions that will help us to do that.
So this is a public advertisement.
I was gonna
West
say,
Enders,
this
get
is-
on out there.
This
and
is
reach
not
out to
saying
us.
that staff we don't employ fundraisers.
And Eileen, I gotta say, you have been a great champion for your ward for outdoor recreation facilities or infrastructure on the West End. And living 2 blocks from you, and I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, I am fully on board with what you're saying. We do see them continually go away. If they're still there, they're run down. We played over at the park next to West End Rec last night. I don't let my kids take their shoes off because I don't know what the heck's in those rocks in there. There could be a needle, there could be a something else. And those are concerns that me as a father have to deal with on a daily basis. So, I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm definitely conveying it along the way as we have discussions as well. One thing I will bring up that was brought up to me last winter, and it was a little late, it was like January by the time someone called out to me, but they were wondering, hey, we've got all these temporary sheets of ice in these neighborhoods here and here and here, but we don't have anything over on the west end. And that was brought up by a gentleman in his 70s. And I was pretty surprised that he wanted to get out on skates. But, you know, if we can identify something, a low hanging fruit like that, where maybe we can get one of those temporary sheets of ice over by West End Rec, by the pool over there. We have a water source, might be an easy low hanging fruit to put in at least a temporary, outdoor rec infrastructure piece. So there, I'm off my soapbox. Thank you, everybody, for listening to that.
Go ahead, George.
One of the best ice skating rinks is over on Latch Island. Those people snow blow it off, shovel it
Yeah.
off.
And Carlos does Lake Winona quite a bit. He'll go out there and shovel for skating as well.
So I know that I hear you. We hear you. Two things. One, just want to bring up, not to belabor this point, but the Aquatic Center also is on the west end. We also took the maintenance issues that need to be done at the Aquatic Center out of the budget as well. Last piece on a more positive note. I mean, I think that one thing that maybe is maybe we don't get enough credit for, I'll just say it that way, is that we did keep the Madison area a green space at this point. So we did use some significant park funds to, get that, I guess, quarter block, saved as green space. Now, again, we don't have anything on it, and it's still it's still considered, city property. It's not considered a park, but
yeah,
we did use park funds to secure that area as potential green space. So.
Okay, we do have a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm an aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, we'll make that adjustment.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions about park maintenance? Otherwise, I'll move on to senior advocacy. Oh, okay. Senior advocacy is on 79. Just a couple, again, introductory comments on advocacy. Goes without saying, I think we've talked about advocacy quite a bit this year. Continually provide more and more services. We continue to see more and more clients. This year in the budget, you will see an increase in the mid section of page 79, 36,329. That is the county portion that is funded to advocacy. We've increased it from 29,000 to 50,000 to 23. We have more confidence than we ever have that the county is going to supply us that amount. I'll be presenting at their budget hearings on September 14th to confirm our request. But we've been working with county administrator and county board members on this increase for advocacy. So we are fairly confident that that's going to be the number that the county will provide. We have indicated to the county that 50,000 is partway there. Really, the official cost of this program to the county is more like 74. We also felt that going from 29 to 74 might not be a prudent ask. So we told them that we would step up our asks over the next couple of years. So this is step one to get us toward the goal of right around 74,000 for this program.
Okay, good.
Otherwise, advocacy is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's, revenues, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Our expenses have not necessarily increased over the years, other than we've gone to a second full-time advocacy position several years ago. So, okay. Trail development is on page 124. Mayor and Council, this is a new fund. We've established this fund primarily for two reasons. One, you can see on page 124 that we have revenue coming in from the state in the amount of $2 million. That's in regards to the Riverfront Trail. So that's the state bonding money that's coming in. So we need to show that revenue coming in and of course, expenditures going out. So we've established this fund. We also anticipate this fund being used for the $700,000 that we received through the state legacy program for the Bluff Traverse or phase 1. So this fund likely will be used for that project as well. Both of those are projects that our staff will be heavily involved in. Well, the end of this year, we've already started obviously, and then heavily next year in the development of the Riverfront Trail and the Bluffs Traverse phase 1. So this is what that fund is in regards to. Now, we did not list the legacy money because we technically don't know the official amount yet. So it's not listed in here, but next year's budget, you may very well see 2.7 million that was shown coming in. So we just did not put it in. Again, it's a budget neutral item, obviously, because revenue comes in, expenditures go out. But we don't officially have a grant agreement, which means we don't have an official amount. So.
Mayor?
Go ahead, George.
Just want to note that thanks to Mike Chickanowski for his work on this Riverfront Trail. I know he's been advocating quite a bit, and also the Bay State Milling for their agreement to allow the trail to go by. So
Yeah, this is a great citywide project. Lucy in community development is heavily involved. Mike Chickanowski with the port, Dana Johnson I know has been helping. Obviously Brian DeFrang in engineering, and Ryan is going to help. I mean,
Right.
Alicia in our office is
Multi-department for sure.
It's a multi-department project, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a great asset to have.
And one thing with the projects that will be funded through this fund, we have to realize not only are our citizens going to be able to utilize these, but these will be regional attractions. You know, they will be attractive to people outside of our community as well. So good investments overall, I think.
Totally. Thank you for your work on this. Wow. So excited about that trip.
We have there's a group of bumps right here, right now. So.
Yeah.
Okay, recreation, large area, that starts on page 160. Again, I'll try and be brief here, but certainly our department has not seen a decrease in activity due to the pandemic. I know that some of our facilities were closed, but we certainly then punted and started to provide services in other ways to the community, like I mentioned with the park system. Certainly some goals for 2022 is that we want to continue to work on the Birdsall property that connects to our ice park. And certainly I know that we recently brought some information back from the Pappenfuss property that also connects the Bluff Traverse. So we're working on those projects as well. Bud King is a never-ending maintenance facility. That's part of the nature of running an ice rink. And we do have some extensive work that'll happen likely in 2022 that may not necessarily be budget items, but that we need to do some of those, 5-year general kind of maintenance. We're planning for, valves and things to be changed out. It's not necessarily a significant budget issue, but it should be noted. Internally, we may do some work on some outbuildings that are still there that, have sat vacant since the build. Certainly, as I mentioned before, if, again, we go forward with the HVAC project, the Masonic, there'll be some, obviously, as Eileen pointed to, there'll be certainly some work that we'll have to do to shift programs and services if that project would happen in 2022. East Rec certainly is looking forward to having regular hours back. We certainly love being the place that's the hub for vaccinations, but speaking on behalf of the kids and all the users, I think they're excited to get regular use of the rec center back as well. So we're ready to have more programming, sort of coming out of the pandemic. Again, if we have to switch to booster shots or something else, then we'll be ready to switch. We'll be implementing new software in our recreation department as well. That item went to council. It'll coordinate with our Civic Plus website. So we'll move away from what really we feel is an antiquated system. We'll help with a lot with IT. It'll help with finance. It'll help with our customers registering, et cetera. It'll be more user friendly. And then more specifically, I did want to note that if you, and I don't mean to go backwards, but I think it's important to note, if you turn to page 72, it is the last page of the recreation budget. And you'll see in the far right-hand column that we're recommending 9,983,724.
On page 72.
172, I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Oh,
172,
okay, thank you.
my bad.
That's right. It's all right.
Far right-hand column, we have recommended 9,983,724. Keep in mind that we have two budget neutral items, as I like to call them. We've got the community center in that 9 million, and we've got the Masonic Temple HVAC in that 9 million. So if you take those projects out and you look at the far left-hand column of the actual, we spent 1.9 million. Our actual budget for Park Rec has been decreased by about 165,000. And one of those, I guess, cuts is that we've gone from 5 recreation coordinators to 4. And so we are moving from 5 coordinators down to 4. So that is a significant cut in our budget.
Are we losing a coordinator or we did already?
We're going from 5 coordinators to 4.
Gotcha.
Yep. We did, however, across the board within the recreation fund, increase our part-time wages. So this is also not, this is more empirical than anecdotal. We were literally 3 lifeguards away from not opening the aquatic center this summer. And we are having a hard time attracting lifeguards.
George?
No,
And-
I'm just saying maybe you should be a lifeguard this next year.
I can't swim.
Yeah.
So that'd be a good one.
So goes without saying that not having an open aquatic facility opens up a lot of other societal issues and some pretty major ones. So we need to increase our part-time wages, and we need to try and attract lifeguards. One of the ways we're going to try and do that is help with some of their certification costs. And it's not just about their hourly wage. It's about how do we attract them, and maybe it's not the hourly wage, but really what they're frustrated with is they've got to pay close to $400 to get their lifeguard certification, and it takes all summer to work before you make that money. And then, so trying to find some other ways to incentivize them, because again, as Ally reports to me, three lifeguards away from can't open. We closed early this summer. One of the earliest dates we've closed because we just simply didn't have the staff. So despite being down overall, we did increase that line item to try and attract across the board our part-time staff. So with that, I'm sorry to jump around. Let's go back to page 160, please. And again, I know I said this now twice, but there are 2 budget neutral items within the recreation fund. You'll see revenue on page 160, midway down, $1.6 million coming in revenue from other sources. And we're doing that as federal grants, as we talked about, at 1.6. And then we've listed the community center as a state grant in the middle of the page for 6.3 million. So again, those are 2. Again, if we don't have 6.3 million come in from a different funding source, obviously we don't do the project, but we have included the community center in these last 2 budgets. One, because I guess council had asked at our previous CIP meeting that we bring it back during budget time for discussion. We've also listed it this way because for what it's worth, we are trying to pursue any and all funding for the community center under the auspice of, this is not just a place to play basketball. This is a place that we use for vaccination clinics. It's a place we use for a warming house. Yes, we do use it for basketball, and we use it for advocacy services. And quite frankly, it is in an area that may meet some qualifiers for socioeconomic status as well, that this is a great benefit for those individuals that may not have certain means to use other programs or facilities, and they come to this center as their place to maybe play basketball or get a good lunch. That it's not just, hey, we're building this to get an extra basketball court. That's important to this community as well, but really there's a broader scope. So we're trying to look for other alternate sources that might reflect this intergenerational use, broader community use, and again, broader community use, meaning
Social
pandemic,
aspects.
social aspects, things like that. So we've listed it in the budget as a state grant, trying to pursue other grants or some other funding sources. Again, call it budget neutral, because if the funding source doesn't come in, obviously the project doesn't go forward. I think that we need to have more discussion about the community center. I think that the council had asked that we do that during the budget process. Again, if you want to do that at a different time, we certainly can. We are very nearing the end. We're probably 98% done toward construction documents, which means that in our pursuit of other funding sources, we're an eyelash away from the proverbial line. This project is shovel ready if there would be another funding source. So we can certainly have that discussion if you want, when we bring that construction drawings back or those documents back. But again, you asked that we put it in the budget for discussion purposes. That's where it is.
Eileen?
I just wanted to thank you for explaining that so clearly. I think that I'm comfortable leaving it in the budget, considering that if and when other funding sources are found, that I know staff would come back to council. So there's another step. And yeah, just that, if we don't find the funding for it, then it doesn't happen this year. So I don't want any community members to, lose sleep over this dollar amount being in the budget. So thank you.
Quite frankly, I don't have any other highlight. I mean, of course, there's a lot of items in here, but I don't have any other highlighted items in the recreation department unless you have questions.
I would just move for tentative approval of the building maintenance, parks, rec, and library.
Second.
We have a motion from Eileen, second from Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad.
Mayor and council, page 6.
Here's where we can cut, right?
Mayor and council, this is the mayor and council budget. This was the first thing to go.
Disband them. We have a dictatorship.
Yes.
Page 6, huh?
We made some very small changes to some of the membership subscriptions and things of that nature. There's some purchase services in here. This is where we put some of the website stuff. Not quite sure. We argue every year about whether it should be here, whether it should be in a different department, but this is kind of where it's settled for a while. Any questions? And this is where the mayor's contingency is located now, instead of being in 2 different places.
What line is that?
That is 6101, which is the bottom of page 7. $4,000.
I will state publicly, I will do my best to not spend that money.
It's interesting because even though it's called the mayor's contingency,
I don't get any.
they have
say
no
in it.
clue what we're doing with it.
That's right.
Mark Peterson thought that should be about $2 million.
It should be $2 million, absolutely.
Did we have, I think we had the rail. Was that in here? I think that was in here before. And we have removed that great was it Great River Railroad Commission or something.
Mhm.
So that's not in this budget. Again, that project is done. I think they're trying to find maybe a reason to exist for another project.
I have a meeting on Thursday. I'll attend and I can give an update at some point.
If for some reason recommendation comes back that gets reestablished, it's a rounded number. We'll plug it back in and find money from something else. Okay, questions? Otherwise, we'll go to page 9, which is the merit board. They don't really spend any money in the merit board. Questions? Page 13, the bloated city manager's budget. Let's see, page 14. This is pretty close to what it's been, made just a few slight adjustments here and there. Questions? Page 26, HR. Deb Beckman is here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have kept this budget pretty similar to previous years. I would just note that both HR and the safety team have worked considerably close with the fire chief this year regarding COVID, and we've worked well with all the other departments to try to keep our staff and facilities operating and keeping them staffed. That's been a big portion of our job in the last year. One thing that you might notice on here is in our professional services line, we do have some wellness piece there. That is something that we have done for the past 5 or so years, where we have an outside source come to City Hall, and it is open to all city employees to have an annual screening. And sometimes employees, that might be the only screening they have for the entire year. So we feel that's very valuable, and we've noticed that it gives us an update with our health plan to make sure that we're achieving goals with employees and making sure that they're staying healthy. So we did the biometric screening assessment this year in June because of COVID. We normally do it in January, but we had to do it in June this year. We had to delay it, but we were able to complete it. We had 73% of our employee population participate, and we were able to see a decrease in pre-hypertension, improvement in total cholesterol, and a decrease in obesity. So we thought that was all good things. And it is important that employees, have that checkup annually, even if it's just their 15 minutes where they come in and get their baseline biometrics done and they meet briefly with a healthcare professional. We feel that it gives them something. If they were left to do it on their own, they might not go do that because they'd have to, take more time rather than a 30-minute checkup here at City Hall where it's convenient for them. So I just wanted to point that out because that is probably the largest dollar amount in the budget that we have, but we again find that very valuable.
And we've really tried to design the wellness program to attack the issues that we're seeing through those biometric screenings. So diabetes, pre-diabetes was a big one a couple of years ago. And so we really did a lot of things on a holistic approach, and we had great participation. Rather than just, some wellness is just about, financial literacy or book club or just doing stuff to kind of get together. We used to do like home run derbies. I got rid of the beanbag throw thing when I first got here because that's all we did for wellness. And the next event we did was a hatchet throw down at the water plant, and just watching Mary Burkter throw a hatchet was worth the price of admission. But we went from that point forward, again, trying to balance between get together. We did goat yoga, doing that sort of thing to get folks together and do some bonding, but really trying to emphasize how we can attack some of these wellness issues. But I really have to say, as far as HR crew this year, I don't know how many updates we did to COVID plan, but it was a very fluid environment, and I really appreciate Deb's help and guidance as we maneuvered through the pandemic and trying to keep the staff safe, especially as a fire department. We really needed to make sure that we could keep those guys safe and not ill. But you think about water, sewer, all of those departments being critical services to the city, and making sure that we were doing everything we could to keep them from getting ill. Questions, comments, HR? We'll turn to page 37. Page 37 is the alternative response team. Now, because we haven't gotten fully up to speed yet with the ART, we're going to carry over the money from this year into next. So there is an actual revenue side of showing that encumbrance going forward. So we encumbered about half a year's worth of cost for the program. My understanding is they've hired one person. They're actually have done some ride-alongs with police and are going through the training that they need to at Hiawatha Valley. And I believe they're interviewing or getting ready to interview some other candidates. So we should have both of the ART members up and running here within a month.
So I know, the one took the job. That Catherine took the job, and the first one we interviewed did not take it. So I say, if for some, I think we kind of thought we were going to get a big influx of people coming in applying for this, but it's not really happening. So
I think that's every job in America. Right?
Yeah.
But in particular, they were expecting, in their normal years, they have so many internships from Winona State and St. Mary's, they could have tried to steer someone into this position. But when they all left at the end of the semester last year, they didn't have access to those folks to apply for the job.
So how much money on this is carryover?
This 185 number, that's what the contract calls for.
Okay.
But if you go to the revenue side, you'll see the encumbrance of half of that from this year. It's on page 4.
Okay.
36309, other revenues. So that's, you see the carryover alternate response team of 90,000.
Okay. Because I know we have till the end of the year, and maybe that's a number maybe we want to look at again if the people are not there for that position. I think we should just kind of monitor it throughout the year, and we can always make an adjustment before December. Correct.
And you and I had a conversation earlier about we'll just launch with one. We would strongly encourage council to just stay the course and let's get 2 on board.
Okay, so
they really need to operate together, at least initially.
Okay, so and hopefully another candidate can come forward. So
any questions regarding ART? If not, we'll move on to 43, which is our safety and health coordinator. Safety and health coordinator splits time with the fire department doing fire inspections. Fire inspection numbers are through the roof. They've done just a tremendous job of doing those. Very important for us because they can get inside these buildings and they can do inspections and try to prevent fires from happening in the first place. But when they do, that pre-incident work is done. And so the firefighters going into the structure have a better understanding of what might be in there. But this is in particular is the health, safety and health coordinator. He's helped us greatly with all of the giving us advice on our own personal protection that we wear. He's constantly been reinforcing it through his own actions. And then just from the safety coordination side, we have monthly meetings. And we really started to talk a lot about near misses, because near misses establish those patterns where something will eventually happen. So we spent a lot of time doing that. And then we spent a lot of time talking about when there are accidents or incidents, going back, reviewing them, finding out why they happen and how we can keep them from happening in the future.
I would also like to add that Paul is our safety coordinator, and he was invaluable during the pandemic. He stayed on top of all of the latest documentation coming out from CDC, Minnesota Department of Health. Contact him. We talk through scenarios with employees and contact situations. And he was just invaluable for that entire time of 2020. I really can't say enough for all the work he did.
Then on page 44, you'll see purchase services. That's where we do our testing, drug and alcohol tests for our CDL drivers, respiratory machine, flu shots. Flu, of course, was big. That was actually our first major push last fall, which was a good dry run for the, if we were going to do mobile drive-through clinics for COVID shots. And then we did move, I think we started it earlier, but we did move our MSDS and our online social, or OSHA training also. Those are online now. MSDS, used to be that really thick book, and trying to keep them all up to date is a full-time chore just for a person to begin with. Now it's all online. It's a lot better, a lot more efficient system.
A lot of companies use that MSDA sheets for door stops.
It's just heavy enough to
everywhere
hold
you
the door
go.
open.
It's probably not something you want OSHA to
So
look at your.
Where did you
door.
used to work, George?
I was self-employed,
Oh, okay, yeah,
Trip and fall hazard.
just stating what they're used for.
yeah.
Next page. These are our internal service funds for the city. 191 page. I'm sorry, page 191. This is the equipment fund. And you have current balances on these funds if council asks. But again, we're not anticipating budgeting for equipment to come out of this fund. We're trying to slowly move towards purchasing, reoccurring items into the general fund. Page 192, equipment replacement. 193. This is all about the same stuff. Facility fund is on 197. Again, 198, 199. Not showing anything coming out. The infrastructure replacement fund is on 202. Here, we're anticipating taking money out of this fund for a city share of the Mankato project. And then as council moved last night, we'll remove the 105,000 to mill and overlay. I will say, though, that the statement was made about the policy, and it had to be in the CIP in order to take money out of this fund. A street reconstruction project has been in the CIP for the last many years, so it actually does technically apply for funding out of this. But council's already decided not to do that, so we'll remove that. And then the park revolving 204, again, this is our newer account. This also shows the $40,000, which would be the match for Sobieski Park. We will make that change according to what happened this evening. Subject to your questions. We'll move on to Jessica.
Do we need a motion to approve your portion of this, Steve?
That would be fine.
I will make a motion to approve the city manager's portion of the budget.
Second,
Motion by Eileen, second from George. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, so for the finance budget, we have some things coming up in 2022. One is that we are going to replace the firewall. So we have that $12,000 budgeted on pages 19 and 20. So the total amount is on page 19, but the line item is about fourth from the top on page 20. So, and then the other item that we added here was endpoint detection. So that'll help keep our system, those two items will help keep our system more secure. And then on page 21, the item purchase services other 5909. Our Microsoft license is up for renewal. So that is reflecting our new updated amount. Now with the Microsoft license, we do have the option that we're looking into moving our emails to Microsoft 365. And if we do that, this amount would be higher. But if we don't, then we have to replace our Exchange storage. And you'll see that line item on 22 for 20,000. So that 20,000 is going to be spent either on an Exchange server or as part of our Microsoft license renewal. And if we decide to go with the 365, we'll bring that back to council because it'll be a change in our budget.
Jessica or Brad, can you tell me how many seats that purchases?
Do you remember?
Seats, how many access
Users?
codes, how many users we can allow?
For the Microsoft licensing, do you remember?
Generally, mayor and council, generally about 150 active
Okay.
email accounts.
Okay, thanks.
Some utility ones, which are minor.
Okay.
And then in 2022, we have our OPEB valuation. So this year we have to do a full valuation. We're required by GASB to do a full valuation every other year. And then under training, I increased that amount. I would like to have the IT coordinator become cybersecurity certified. So I'd like to have him attend some classes on cybersecurity. And then the last two items that I have,
As part of that, we need to have somebody who's gone through that training in order for us to be able to get the insurance, correct?
that's, it's not a requirement of the insurance, but it helps with the rate for the insurance. So
'cause-
if we have somebody cybersecurity trained, it helps reduce the cost of cybersecurity
Right,
insurance.
because we looked at the insurance
And then I mean, and of course it would help keep the city safe to have somebody who's aware of the new trends that are happening. Brad has been doing a great job of sending out training for everybody, onboarding new employees.
trying to trap the manager opening the wrong, yeah. That's all great stuff. And it's, I can't emphasize it enough. They're
Yeah.
coming after cities. They've attacked churches. I mean, any place they think they can get some cash, that's what they're gonna do.
I mean,
So,
we had an example last week where they made it look like it was an email from me
Yeah,
to
Scott,
council.
did you want some gift cards?
Yeah, gift cards, yeah, car warranty I'm calling about, yeah. But that's a perfect example of how easily we can be
Right.
corrupted electronically.
And
So
that's why the training is so important. I really encourage everybody. Brad sends out the emails every other month, I believe, once a quarter. And those trainings are really important because they help keep you, they help teach you what some of the new issues are that are popping up. With
yeah, it
IT.
helps you identify weird things that
Yeah.
you might not be aware of, yeah.
All right, and then on page 22, we have Lucy mentioned earlier that we have Energov upgrade coming up. It's a required update, and that update is requiring a replacement of our server. Our server is due for an upgrade anyway, and that would be a replacement of both the Encode and the Energov server. So those
Can you
two
just
items are.
describe real quick what's Encode and what's Energov?
So Encode is our financial software,
Okay.
and Energov is the permitting software.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So that is all for the finance budget. Next year for our audit, we are going to have a federal audit again. So the small packet that you had in addition to the big financial report, we're going to be required to do that because we have revenues over federal revenues over $750,000. So that is included in this audit expense. And that is on page 23. And then on 24 is the county assessing fee. So that's the fee for Winona County for the assessing for the tax levies. And somebody had a question earlier on contingency, which is page 71. What was, does anybody have, what was the question on that one?
Pam's question was unexpected, unbudgeted. If you recall, in years past, we've had 3 or 4 different line items in here that had significant amounts of money. So we try to simplify that a bit. One is showing that transfer in, but these, like the unbudgeted number, I mean, you could take this over, Jessica, but that unbudgeted number, that's the leftover or unbudgeted LGA, correct? Or no? All right.
No, so
You talking about the unbudgeted?
part of this is with the salary and benefits changes. And then we budget for amounts if employees changed between single and family insurance.
And we have some money for HR if something comes up that's unexpected, and then the unexpected unbudgeted.
True contingency.
I'm sorry.
That's true.
Right, true
contingency.
contingency,
So an example might be,
snowfall.
yeah.
So we
here
used to have an
had it-
actual line item for extra snow if there'd been a large snow. And what we've decided to do is try to pool all of those together rather than have all these separate lines of contingency items.
Go ahead, Steve.
I do have to ask about 363,000. That's a lot of money. What's that going to?
Again, I think that's to cover salary increases.
Salary.
Well, employee services is probably a better way of putting it. So there's other benefit issues that might pop up during the year as well.
Okay, it's a lot of money.
Well, we've got a lot of,
Okay,
we've got
okay.
a lot of
I'm just,
people. Yep.
whenever I see unbudgeted, I get nervous.
Well, yeah, and some of this is just, it's kind of the game we play with because of the union environment.
Now I understand.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, and then on page 90, we have the debt service. So the PIR bond fund, that's where our, that one, it's kind of just in and out. That's where our assessments come in. Page 94, that's our equipment certificate. So I believe we'll be finished paying for that in February 2023. And then on page 97, we have our geo tax abatement bonds. And those fees are agreed to when we take out the bond. So those amounts we don't have control over. And then on page 207,
207?
207 is behind the orange page. That is the lodging tax. So that's this is just in and out. This is what we collect and then it gets turned over to the visitor center. The city retains a small portion of that, and that is included in the general fund revenue. And I'll find the line item for you in just a minute. That's on page 3. It's account number, it's right in the center of the page. It's account number 101-34114. So that's the city's administration fee for the lodging tax.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we charge essentially Visit Winona to facilitate receiving
Yeah,
and
so
sending that money back out.
We collect it. We collect 100% of it and we send 96% of it, I believe,
Okay.
to Visit Winona, and we retain the remaining 4.
Gotcha. Thank you. Eileen?
I was just gonna motion to approve Jessica's portion of the budget.
I will second that.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
before we vote on that, because we're at the last item here, I've had something on my list and we perhaps passed it, but I got to ask, page 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom. It is count 36309. I'm seeing use of reserves, $500,000. Where was that? We're at the end of the program, folks, and that I've had that circled and been waiting for it.
And that was on our list to talk about at the end.
Okay, so we didn't go past it.
But I mean, now is as good a time I think as any.
Okay, is it within Jessica's purview here or?
Yes, I think between the three of us, we'll try to answer the questions as best we can.
We got a motion on the table. Is your advice to clear that off and then we have that
Yeah,
discussion?
That's
Okay,
fine.
I didn't know when to do it,
Again,
so.
all we're doing is a tentative. It comes back to you in September. It's not
All
like
right.
we're gonna say, wait, you approved it on August
Okay.
31st. You
Okay.
can't change it now. That's
Okay.
not the way this works.
Don't know the process. so.
Yep, that's why.
Okay, who made the motion in the second again?
Eileen and I did the.
Eileen and George. Okay, so motion from Eileen, second from George. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No, we're gonna vote on it, were we?
We were going to vote on Jessica's portion, correct?
This is the finance section of the
That's what you
budget.
just voted on.
Tentative
Okay,
approval of the
okay,
finance
right,
section.
Okay,
Are you in favor, George?
yes.
Okay, very good. Motion passes.
Okay.
Now, okay, the way I read this, and again, I'm new, need instruction. I see the way I'm tracking this. So I'm on page 4, several lines up, $500,000 from reserve dollars. Looking at the CAFR from that we got in April, we had just over $5 million. So the proposal is to take about 10% of our reserve dollars and spend that on daily operations. First of all, am I characterizing that generally? Am I on the right track? Am I understanding this right?
Yes, so this would be to use the reserves. I
Okay.
believe there's about 5 million. Let me just.
I just found it in the CAFR. I mean, so maybe it's slightly different today, but okay. The principle is, okay. So help me understand if there's a different characterization, because I'm concerned if this is what we're doing, I need to know why. I think we all budget to some extent at home, right? And so the concern is that absent a crisis, we're spending our savings account on daily operations. It appears to me that we're spending 10% of our savings account, $500,000 out of a $5 million reserve account. This reserve account is to help us if we have an emergency with cash flow, with some unforeseen crisis or unforeseen opportunity. And it appears to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're spending reserve dollars to pay for daily operations. It's like using my savings account because because if it's a family situation, household situation, because I'm not making enough money, but I'm spending more than I'm making. Help me with that.
Yes, that is correct. It is budgeting to use reserve money.
On daily operations.
Yes.
Okay.
What account is that 5 million coming out of? I don't have my.
It's general reserve, right?
Yeah, it's
General
it's
reserve
general
fund.
reserve fund.
General fund.
General fund reserves.
And higher and lower in previous years. What we're trying to do as part of our plan is to bring that number down significantly from where it was and to get that to zero. But what we're recommending is to not try to do this all in one year. We want to set this fall general fund policy, general fund balance policy. Usually what you look for is about 6 to 8 months worth of revenue of operating costs in that fund. And so what we're trying to do is craft a position and a policy that says that's what we want, 6 to 8. Council needs to make that decision, and Baker Tilly will help us to do this. And once we set that, that will be our guiding document going forward. And then what we want to do is, instead of taking money out at the end of the year, if there's money left over. Right now, it's been divided into those four funds, right? The facility fund, the park fund.
Okay.
What we're saying is, before we do that, let's keep it in the general fund. Let's not move it out. Let's build the general fund balance, that reserve balance up, so that it is standalone. What we've been doing in the past is taking that money and just moving it out. We want to keep that fund 6 to 8 months, whatever the policy is. Once we've done that, anything that's over, that's when we would recommend to the council that we would then put it in those other pots.
Okay.
And again, this is one of those decisions that we're recommending to the council. It's going to take us a little bit to get this ship turned around, but this is one of those major movements that we're recommending. And it's been, we've had to make a lot of sacrifice. Well, I hate the word sacrifice, but we made a lot of changes to the budget this year in anticipation of having to bring that down so we can bring that reserve funding down as well.
I hear the words. You alluded to that we've done this in the past and we've been consistently doing this. We've been spending reserve dollars down
Yes,
at approximately $500,000.
no, more.
Fluctuated between, yeah, more and less. Each year's been different.
Right.
So is this money that is left over after the last budget? I mean, am I hearing that or is this money that it's left over in a general fund?
Primarily.
Yeah, it's money that's set aside for cash flows in the general fund.
That's the general reserve account, but this 500,000 is not leftover money. That's
No, this
using.
is using that.
Just using it, correct.
It's using
Right.
Again, I'm new. Maybe I don't know, but I see what I see. And I see that we're taking from the savings account to pay for general operations. I'm on the boards of at least 2 nonprofits, and I'm heavily in the finances, and I'm always, there's always that temptation. Hey, well, we got this problem, we got this funding problem, so we'll just take from reserve and we smooth that over, spend it on operations. And I said, nah, you really wind up in trouble when you do that.
That's why we're trying to stop doing that.
Well, then let's stop doing it.
But then the taxpayers have to make up that difference.
That's the cuts we would need to make
And they've already.
to make up that difference and or the increases in tax revenue. So what we're suggesting is let's take a step and let's evaluate with Baker Tilly. Let's get a policy that we can all agree on, because some cities want to have 12 months worth of operating reserves.
Right.
I would argue that's way too much to be sitting on. But that's for the council to decide. So
Yeah.
once we've gotten our heads around what that number is, let's attack this so it doesn't happen through a combination of reductions in costs, and let's work our way out of it. That's what we're saying.
I think I've articulated my concern, and I'll look forward to a final product and see what that looks like. And I would like to hear about some history on this, so I kind of see our trend. If I can see a trend to this, I think I'd like that. My whole deal is I don't want to be using a savings account to pay for daily operations.
We don't either.
Yeah,
But we also, I think the key thing here is if that rainy day fund gets too big, then we are losing out on opportunities to use it. What does Minnesota State Auditor recommend for what is the minimum required operational fund, and then what is the average? You had kind of stated 6 to 8 months, something like that.
It's all over I've seen cities that have 3 years worth of operating in the bank.
But then there's nothing really happening in terms of progress or projects.
No, they're still spending money operationally, but they got all this money sitting in the bank.
Okay.
And again, I would argue that that's way too much.
Sure.
So part of the issue here is that we rely heavily on tax levy and LGA, and that money doesn't come in until July.
Right.
So
we need to be able to make
from
that gap.
January to July.
Right.
That we're just waiting for the revenue to come in.
Right.
What are our expenses January to July? How much? How many dollars?
Yeah, so it depends on the timing of projects.
Okay.
It depends on a lot of things. If you looked at it, it depends on when these big projects are happening.
Steve, I'm trying to get it too. And I've been having conversations with people along the way to try and understand. Because one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is as elected officials, we are not experts in finance. Now, you have probably the most expertise in the financial field in terms of being able to drill down on numbers. But I'm a bike guy. She's an art person. She's an outdoors person. He worked at Peerless Chain. We all have our own individual personal examples. And if we have a small business, we're familiar with how small business works. But government finance is a complicated beast. And the more I dig in, the more I realize I know less about it. And so as I'm reading, and Jessica actually gave me two phenomenal books about, what, 2 months ago, maybe a month and a half. And granted, they were difficult for me to read because my brain doesn't necessarily process that kind of information in that way. So a lot of times I have to reach out and say, explain this to me, just like a lot of us are doing. So, you know, a lot of times when I'm looking at this, I can add and subtract all day long. I can see money being moved from one fund to another. It's just, it starts to become this kind of like living organism of how best, you know, and the crystal ball is always fuzzy too, you know, like if we have a major flood event here in town, that could literally wipe out all cash that the city has completely. Like any funds we have, that's literally a drop in the bucket at that point. We're talking billions of dollars. We're not talking millions at that point. And so we have to, you know, try and look at our risk. We have to try and look at how much we have, what opportunities are we losing out on, and where can we make changes to potentially use that money better, ultimately, for the citizens of our community, you know? And we want to make sure that, and Steve mentions this in his letter, we have an excellent level of service here in Winona. And I think with very few exceptions, citizens in general can say that we have an excellent level of service here. I was speaking to a mayor in a different state about a month and a half ago, and she disclosed to me the situation she was in terms of city finance. Because of the shortfalls at the state level, and there is no county funding coming into them, none of this little maneuvering of you pay us, we pay you kind of thing. She literally has to rely on local private entities to put in any infrastructure, sewer, water, streets. They also have electrical grid covered under their municipality. So they have an extra utility in there as well. If they want to expand or put a new neighborhood in, if they have deteriorating infrastructure pieces, sewer, water, utility type stuff, they have to go call that person and say, hey, can you throw us another $15 million? We want another neighborhood out there. We don't want to be in that spot, you know? And I think everyone here in staff recognizes that while every year the budget is tough, because as George stated, we are always cutting. We're never coming in and saying, let's throw another million in there because we really want this or that. What we're truly doing every time is we're talking about people's jobs, and we're talking about lack of services or reduction in services to our community. And so that's where it gets very difficult for us as relatively uninformed people. But I am able to recognize in the conversations that I've had that we have good, solid people here in staff that have been working their butts off, especially in the last year, to try and find a good compromise for us as council members to be able to comprehend, understand, continue the level of service that we've given without damaging our rainy day fund too bad. You know, so that's the way I've been trying to take it overall. I hope that's representative of the conversations that I've had with staff. But you know, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. And if they suggest to me that we should do this or that, or move this money here to there, with my untrained eye, I have to be able to rely on the people that we ultimately will rely on for these services and for the fiscal stability of the city for years to come. So
I think your instincts are dead on, and that's why we made this effort to stop moving in that direction and to turn this around. But we would really recommend, we need to set a policy that everyone understands and is crystal clear and is definable. And we need the council to help us to do that. You need to tell us, we'll give you the advice and the recommendation, but you need to set that policy. That will then guide us going forward. Maybe this 500,000 next year is going to be 150,000. Maybe it's zero. I don't know. It's sort of like what we did with the water fund. We needed to raise rates because we knew 5 years out we had this large project. And so we raised the rates and then when the project came on board, we had the cash to do it. It's kind of this, it's going to be, I think, very similar so that we can keep a good level of service to the community and provide the things that we need to while we're still addressing this other issue and getting that back on track. We perhaps we're probably too aggressive about, we added depreciation where it hadn't been in. We moved things out of the equipment fund and put them into the general fund. We think those are all really smart things to do, but we need this cushion to help us to start moving that around. So that's all we're in 100% agreement.
Yeah, and questions are good because what it does is it helps us look at things a little bit differently as well. So I want you to know every question you've asked, I've been making notes and trying to absorb it along the way as well.
And we haven't had this discussion, staff and council, in how many years? And that's why I think, we have the policy list. We really need to, they're not robust enough where they need to be.
So Steve,
This was my favorite meeting. That's what I was waiting for.
I did notice you brought your calculator.
Kind of
so-
sick. How can you not be at a
Go ahead,
budget meeting
George.
without your calculator?
Jessica, if you could, or whoever, if you can just say, we have this unreserved number here of $500,000. If you could just go back 5 budgets and let us know because I presume that number is in there. Let us know what that number was. We can back up five budgets. If you have extra time, back up 8 budgets.
That's good.
so
And then, so we see that number.
Mayor, if I might, just one last
Please,
piece.
yeah. I was hoping someone would have stopped me along the
No,
way there. Okay.
You got it on a roll sometimes.
I know, sorry.
As Steve said, you're right on with the questioning. I just would add this. It is taking 10% out of the reserves on paper. And certainly to balance the budget, we're required to do that, to provide you a balanced budget. If you can follow me here, let's pretend it's 2019, the end of 2019. We put 400,000 into the reserve, into the internal service funds, 50,000 into equipment, 50,000 into facility, 50,000 into infrastructure, and then we did 50,000 into the park revolving fund for the first time. So 200,000 went into those funds. If we're sitting at the end of 2022 and that same situation happened, this drawdown from the reserve is not 500,000. It's, what did I just say? In that scenario, it's 300,000. That would be the drawdown from the reserves. So if there is just to reiterate, if there is a favorable budget balance, we are not taking 10% of the general fund balance. And that's, I think, just wanted to reiterate that Steve mentioned that, but we would come to you then and say, we don't feel we should put those favorable budget balance dollars into those internal service funds. It should go and those favorable budget dollars should stay in the general fund balance so that we're not taking 10% off.
Okay.
Maybe it's less.
Right.
But in order to balance the budget, we certainly do have to account for that. It certainly could be 10% of the general fund is used to cover operations.
Okay, so I get it. I understand.
So where I think we'd like to go, and again, we need to solidify this in a policy. If we say 6 to 8 months, let's say it's $12 million. When we have that $12 million mark set, anything that comes in that's extra, that would then go into those 4 funds. So what that's going to mean is discipline on the part of all of us to not spend down those equipment fund, the facility fund, park fund.
Yeah.
We should only touch those things on things like when our fire truck caught on fire and we needed 50 grand, right? We came to the council and said, we got to have this hazmat truck. There's nothing we can do about it. We found a used one. It's in great condition. We need 50 grand out of the equipment fund. It was there and we grabbed it and did the project. We would prefer to do it that way rather than we're taking this extra money at the end of the year, and instead of hanging on to it, we're throwing in these other funds and then just sort of using them it's nice to have it that way, but we got to take care of the first thing, which is make sure the fund is strong and funded. Okay. Dead horse, can we move on? Okay. We provided some updates to council. So this sheet right here is the library information coming from the county.
The amount that came from the county is the column with the ending balance. You'll see in 2021 that we haven't received the full amount. We received it in 2 payments. So we haven't gotten the second payment yet. We get that later in the year.
And this is for library.
That's for the library, right?
From the county.
From the county,
Yeah.
yes.
Exactly.
Okay, next item, City of Winona Local Government Aid 2022 budget. You asked to see where the LGA was going. This is where it is. Again, we want to have this discussion this fall. You know, where do we want to ultimately be with LGA to be using for streets and some other things? We know this isn't the number that you all want. You want to have a lot more to do with street work. We get that. But for the next year or so, we might need to see numbers a little bit more like this until we can get our footing back underneath us and fix some of those other issues. And I would also, again, remind you, Mankato is going to get tore up. It's going to be a huge project. You've got all of the work along Broadway on the sidewalk work that's going to spill out into the streets, a lot of disruption, and then the MSA project. So there's going to be a lot going on. Total tax base. Okay. So this shows that in 2012, the total tax base had a negative 9.15%. And the estimated in 2022 is 7.16%.
That's a good looking trend.
That's a very good trend. So why is that number important? If you take what we've proposed in the budget, and now we run into what we call the Dieter charts. God bless his soul. So this first one, this sheet right here, is the estimated increase to taxpayers. So this shows a 5.2 recommended levy increase. Again, that's what we're recommending. If you look at a residential homestead property, the estimated market value, $155,000. Their estimated increase will be an extra $27 spread out over the year. That the increase per year. Yes. And then we broke it down into commercial apartments and seasonal recreation, so you can see what that is. One of the interesting notes, though, is even though it's 5.2%, right? If you look at the percent increase across the board, it's all in the 4.8, 4.9 region for the most part. That's because the tax base expanded so much. And then this larger packet, it's got a lot of information. We don't need to go through the whole thing. But it shows different tax rates. It shows proposed taxes from the recommended budget, use of local government aid, shows where those major areas that we intend, that we're recommending spending the money. But on the last, is it the last 2 pages now?
Last 2 pages.
Last 2 pages now. This shows for that $155 or $155,000 valued residential homestead. This shows where their taxes are going, which services are funding for that.
I just want to thank you. This is one of the coolest things ever. I think it makes taxes a lot more understandable for our community members. I don't know how, I feel like this should go on our website so people can understand what's actually happening.
It should go in the Facebook comments. for
Yes.
every post.
So thank you. But I just want to, I didn't mean to cut you off, Steve, if you had something else you wanted to say.
I did not. I wanted to thank Jessica. Again, we've been,
Sorry.
you know, in and her department for coming up with this. You know, we keep saying we want to see more information, Again, this has been a fairly unique year. We haven't had this much council questions, involvement. We appreciate it. But the reason we didn't have these things prepared, again, quite frankly, is because it's never been asked from us before. But this is the kind of stuff we can turn out, and I think it is beneficial both for you and for the community to at least visually see for every dollar, where's it going?
Yeah.
What, you know, what am
Very
I,
much
what am I
appreciated.
funding?
Excellent. This is what I asked for. So thank you.
Could I make one comment on it? If you try to compare the LGA amount to the blue spreadsheet on the front, you'll notice that there's a difference in the amount. And the reason for that is the street reconstruction line, rather than using the current LGA amount, what we do is the 2021 LGA that's unbudgeted goes into the street reconstruction fund, and it's reserved for use the following year. So this $365,000, that's money from 2021, whereas the rest of these numbers are 2022 budget. So the number doesn't match exactly to what you'll see on this these blue columns on the local government aid.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I know the viewers at home, all 2 or 3 of them can't see this. But just for any who are listening or for our friendly reporter, I think that this is really useful. On a good day, my house is probably in like the 140 range, which means that my taxes will go up $24. And for the low price of that, I can get all of these services that the city offers, which I think is fantastic. And according to this chart, if my home were slightly nicer than it is, and I were paying $581 in taxes a year, a nice chunk of that goes to, well, the biggest chunk of that goes to our police, fire, those sorts of things. And the percentage that goes to things like library, rec, advocacy is quite small. The number of dollars that I pay in, me personally, Eileen, is quite small. So I think it's important for people to recognize the actual physical dollars that you're handing over. I think probably a lot of people spend more on a couple trips to the grocery store than they do on their city services. So just trying to keep that in perspective.
And the plug for Lucy is, you look at that $1.32. The work that they do is what grows that tax base. So she would always make an argument that she should probably have more resources than the police and fire because they're the ones that really grow the city. But that's why I try to get her to leave the room. But we sort of hand the budget off at this point. This is sort of the end of this really long effort that the staff has gone through, starting in late winter, early spring, working on CIP, working on budget guidance, doing forecasting, and culminates with the first meetings that we have with staff. I think probably not the first, but maybe the 4th or 5th time we compiled everything, we were at about an 18% increase. And I think, we were all running around pulling what little hair we had left out, screaming this, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to make this work? And so the budget that you see in front of us or in front of you is a culmination of all of those efforts, of things that we started to do, like the soft hiring freeze last year, and carrying that on through, and then some of the other decisions that needed to be made to get here. So I think our next budget conversation as a group will be on the 20th of September. And what we'll be looking for there is for the council to set the preliminary levy. We'll then work all fall that number that you set on September 20th cannot go up. It can only go down or stay the same. And the final levy will be determined in December.
8:04.
No, I'm not adjourning.
Oh, okay.
Just to make a comment. No,
I thought you
no,
were.
but probably right after
Sorry about
that.
that. Yeah.
Like I said, yes, there was a lot of work put into this budget as to, to get to where we at, or where we are at. Now, there's no doubt about it. Every one of us sitting in this room can afford this tax increase. You could probably give us 10% and we could afford it, those of us sitting in this room. There are people out there that are not going to be able to afford this. And like I say, a lot of time and effort was put into it. These charts, which we used many, many times before, it's very, very informative. It explains how the taxes are spread out. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in there. And then again, we got to remember, people aren't building $1 million of buildings in this town to be going through tax increases. So just something to remember. I say, this is fine. We'll go from here. But just so remember as we move forward. So, and the challenges are always going to be there. Thank you. And with that, if there's nothing else, I move we adjourn.
I think procedurally, you need to vote on a tentative budget.
I was
On the
gonna ask
entire-
about that.
Not you did that each individually, but I believe procedurally, you need to do a tentative approval of the budget.
Okay, then I would motion for a tentative approval of the budget that's been presented over the last 2 days.
We have a motion from Eileen, a second from Pam. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, I move
Motion
we
passed.
adjourn.
It's 8:06.
Maybe-
George.
8:06, 8:06.
Motion from George, second from Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I know.
For everybody in the room, I just offer a friendly reminder. We've been trying to be better about all leave the building at the same time, or leave together with a couple people, or 2 of you go together.